However, they were killed on the spot before they could take more than a few steps. On one side, it was a heavily injured and exhausted army. On the other side, it was a ferocious army with a ferocious aura. It was clear who was superior. The outcome of this battle was already decided. With the death of two 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators, Elixir Yang sect's greatest concern was no longer present. On the long street, Ji Qingtian, Little Fatty and Shi Jian fell to the ground and laughed out loud without a care for their image. Their laughter affected the wounds on their bodies, causing the 3 of them to suck in a breath of cold air. However, the 3 of them continued to laugh. With Xiaoning's support, Ling Rou could barely stand. At that moment, a rare smile appeared on Ling Rou's face as well. It was extremely alluring. We survived? Shi Jian scratched his head and looked at Ji Qingtian and Little Fatty in disbelief, grinning foolishly. That's right. Ji Qingtian heaved a long sigh of relief and lamented, we survived. It feels King great to be alive. Little Fatty cursed and beamed. When the 4 of them returned to Xiantian City, they had already disregarded their lives and did not think that they could survive. Right now, they were enjoying the joy of surviving a calamity, and every single breath they took was incomparably blissful. After this battle, the friendship between the 4 of them was completely different from before. This was a friendship forged through life and death and the baptism of blood. It was extremely precious in the cultivation world. When he saw that, Su Zimo smiled faintly and a warm current flowed through his heart for a long time. Unknowingly, the rain had stopped. The storm came and went quickly. The dark clouds dispersed and sunlight shone on the long street and the faces of the 5 of them in a dazzling manner. It wasn't just Su Zimo. After today, the names of the other 4 would spread through Xiantian City as well. Following Elixir Yang sect's attack, the other major factions joined the battle as well. Chiguramon, Puppet sect and cultivators from other sects and factions wanted a share of the loot. Right then, a black-robed cultivator walked over slowly with a bone spear in his hands. There were faint streaks of blood on the spear in a horrifying manner. Arriving before Su Zimo, the black-robed cultivator stood still. The actions of the black-robed cultivator attracted countless gazes. It's him, the fiend heir of Malevolent Earth sect. What is he trying to do? I don't know, he doesn't seem friendly. Ji Qingtian and the others retracted their smiles with grim expressions. They could sense an intense aura of danger from the black-robed cultivator. This person was extremely strong. In fact, a thought flashed through their minds: even if they were in their peak condition, they would not be a match for this person even if they joined forces. The black-robed cultivator glared at Su Zimo for a moment without saying anything. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged. Very good, the black-robed cultivator nodded and declared proudly, I'm Shuaiyang, the fiend heir of Malevolent Earth sect. You're not bad. I'll give you a chance to join Malevolent Earth sect and become my personal guard. Ji Qingtian and the others were shocked. One of the 7 fiend sects, Malevolent Earth sect. That was one of the top factions in Tianhuang mainland. However, it belonged to the fiend sects and was different from theirs. Furthermore, the fiend heir of Malevolent Earth sect was arrogant and his tone was forceful with a condescending attitude. It was truly unpleasant. Ji Qingtian and the others looked at Su Zimo nervously. Given their understanding of Su Zimo, there was a high chance that he would reject the fiend heir of Malevolent Earth sect. Given the Malevolent Earth sect heir's personality and methods, he would definitely be filled with killing intent and attack Su Zimo the moment he was rejected. Su Zimo had just fought a huge battle and was at his weakest right now. How could he be a match for the fiend heir of Malevolent Earth sect? Could it be that after surviving a fierce battle of life and death, he would have to face another calamity? True enough. Su Zimo smirked. What's Malevolent Earth sect? I've never heard of it. The fiend heir of Malevolent Earth sect? What's so great about that? When they heard that, the surrounding cultivators were in an uproar. Many cultivators looked at Su Zimo as though they were looking at a dead man. In reality, Su Zimo was not spouting nonsense. Back then, a fiend heir of Malevolent Earth sect died in his hands. In the fiend sects, there could only be one fiend heir per cultivation realm. Therefore, if Su Zimo had not killed the fiend heir of Malevolent Earth sect back then, Shuiyang would not have been ranked. Chapter 378. Shuiyang's expression darkened instantly as he narrowed his eyes. The bone spear in his hands trembled slightly as though it was alive, emitting a shuddering malevolent aura. Right then, a soft chuckle sounded from not far away. Shuiyang, you're so impressive. A man in luxurious robes strode over. He was as beautiful as jade and his black hair was tied up without a single strand of mess. His eyes were clear as water and there were no flaws on him at all. When he saw that person, Shuiyang's expression was unchanged. However, there was a hint of wariness in the depths of his eyes. Someone from Glass Palace. I think that's the legacy disciple of Glass Palace, Pei Chunyu. So, it's him. I heard that he's at the peak of 7 Meridian Foundation establishment and is only a step away from 8 Meridian Foundation establishment. He's just waiting to fight for the Meridian unlocking elixir in the Elixir Pool sect ruins. A commotion broke out from the crowd. Pei Chunyu arrived in front of Su Zimo and nodded towards him with a friendly smile before turning to Shuiyang. Shuiyang, you're making things difficult for fellow Daoist Su Zimo. That's equivalent to making Glass Palace your enemy. Fufu. Shuiyang scoffed coldly and asked instead, since when did that lad have anything to do with Glass Palace? If he's really related to Glass Palace, would you have allowed the 4 mounted bandits to surround him and only appear now? No matter what, you're from the Fiend sects and I'm from the Immortal sections. Pei Chunyu replied coldly, Shuiyang, don't waste your effort. Fellow Daoist Su is righteous and will definitely not be with someone from the Fiend sections. In the blink of an eye, the 2 top cultivators of Shantian City were at odds over Su Zimo. Both factions are starting to rope in Su Zimo after making a name for themselves in that battle. Yes, that man's potential is immeasurable for him to be able to kill 2 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators. He'll definitely be of great use to either faction in the future. Given that man's potential, he might even be able to leave the ancient battlefield with Pei Chunyu and join Glass Palace eventually. Many cultivators looked at Su Zimo with admiration. Su Zimo's expression didn't change. He suddenly said, you two can leave. There's no need to waste your breath here. I won't join either of you. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere instantly dropped to the freezing point. The originally noisy discussions also gradually died down. Everyone's gazes fell on Su Zimo. Some were stunned, some were surprised, and some were puzzled. Such an opportunity was hard to come by, and if it was anyone else, they would gladly accept it. Who would have thought that this person would actually refuse the invitation of the 2 great powers in front of everyone? Moreover, Su Zimo's tone was not polite at all. He even expressed some impatience and disgust. Isn't this person too arrogant? Fufu, do you think that you can lord over the city just because you killed 2 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators? This is called acting recklessly. Offending 2 major powers at once, I'd like to see what kind of fate this person will have. In reality, among everyone present, Ji Qingtian and the others were probably the only ones who could understand Su Zimo's intentions. Firstly, Su Zimo had an agreement with Elixir Yang sect. Secondly, be it Malevolent Earth sect or Glass Palace, they had never thought of paying anything and merely wanted to recruit Su Zimo. At that moment, the cultivators of Elixir Yang sect were still trying their best to kill the remnants of the 4 mounted bandits. As for the 2 factions, they did not want to lose a single soldier and wanted to recruit Su Zimo. Most importantly, Ji Qingtian and the others could not see any bit of sincerity from Pei Chunyu and Shuiyang. Even though Pei Chunyu was polite, there was a condescending arrogance in his tone. Deep down, he looked down on Su Zimo. Rather than calling it an invitation, it would be more accurate to call it a form of charity. If Ji Qingtian and the others could sense it, Su Zimo was even clearer. Therefore, Su Zimo rejected without hesitation. Fufu, ha ha ha. Suddenly, Shuiyang laughed and looked at Pei Chunyu mockingly, saying leisurely, after saying so much, it's just someone's wishful thinking. Interesting. A dark look flashed through the depths of Pei Chunyu's eyes. Su Zimo's words were equivalent to humiliating him in front of everyone. As a legacy disciple of Glass Palace, what was Su Zimo's status and identity? Coupled with Shui Yang's fanning of the flames, Pei Chunyu was already filled with killing intent. Expressionlessly, Pei Chunyu maintained his smile and asked gently once more, "Fellow Daoist Su, I didn't hear you clearly earlier on. Can you repeat yourself?" Even though Pei Chunyu was smiling and his voice was rather gentle, Ji Qingtian and the others felt their scalps tingle and goosebumps rise all over their bodies. In other words, he was giving Su Zimo another chance. If Su Zimo could not grasp this opportunity, he would kill him. Pei Chunyu had the qualifications and strength to do so. Ji Qingtian and the others looked anxious, hoping that Su Zimo could endure for the time being and not offend two top factions for the sake of injustice. In everyone's opinion, Su Zimo was at his weakest after a fierce battle and was covered in injuries. Even if Su Zimo was in his peak condition, he might not be a match for Pei Chunyu. How could a legacy disciple of Glass Palace, one of the immortal sects, be compared to someone like the Four Mounted Bandits? Ji Qingtian and the others looked at Su Zimo nervously. All of a sudden, Su Zimo smiled. "Didn't hear me clearly? I'll make it short and repeat myself." Pausing for a moment, Su Zimo opened his mouth gently and spat out a single word. It was earth-shattering. "Get lost." As soon as he finished speaking, the surroundings were completely silent. Not a single sound could be heard. Many cultivators' mouths were agape as they stared at the blood-soaked figure in shock. There was only one word left in their minds: lunatic. For some reason, Ji Qingtian and the others relaxed instead and felt relieved. That was Su Zimo. If there was injustice in his heart, he would get rid of it. It was as Su Zimo had said back then, "I cultivate not to endure silently, but to have a clear mind and settle grudges as I please." Pei Chunyu's killing intent naturally could not escape Su Zimo's spirit perception. Since that was the case, Su Zimo was even more displeased. The only reason why Su Zimo dared to challenge Pei Chunyu was because of his demon form. Su Zimo would not release that trump card until the very last moment. Otherwise, Su Zimo would have already taken action the moment Pei Chunyu had the intention to kill him and would not have said so much to the latter. Pei Chunyu froze for a moment. It was clear that he had not expected Su Zimo to have such a reaction. Or rather, Su Zimo dared to have such a reaction. Fu. Pei Chunyu laughed. His voice was deep and there was a metallic sound in his laughter that was extremely ear-piercing. A moment later, Pei Chunyu retracted his smile and his palms that were initially behind his back drooped naturally, shrouded in a layer of jade-like light that was crystal clear. "You have great potential and I admire that as well." However, Pei Chunyu's gaze was cold as he changed the topic. "Since I can't use you, I'll destroy you." Chapter 379. This person is under my protection. Just as everyone thought that Su Zimo was dead for sure, a voice sounded from the side with an unquestionable tone. Not far away, a sword beam sped over. A charming young man stood on the sword with a picturesque face. It was none other than Tang Yu of Elixir Yang's sect, who liked to dress up as a man. Just as everyone's attention was on Tang Yu, Pei Chunyu's eyes flickered with a hidden glint as he suddenly clenched his fist and attacked. That punch was headed straight for Su Zimo's chest at an extremely fast speed. On the surface of his fist, 5 beams of spirit light shone and burst forth like a blazing sun, releasing a blinding light that was blinding to the eyes. 5 spirit patterns, a perfect spirit weapon. On Pei Chunyu's palm was a perfect grade glove that was as thin as a cicada's wing and almost transparent. If not for the fact that he channeled spirit energy, the glove would have been difficult to discover. It was a sure kill attack. "Watch out!" Tang Yu's expression changed starkly as she exclaimed. Pei Chunyu and Su Zimo were way too close and could touch each other with a stretch of his hand. Tang Yu could almost see a ghastly bloody hole appearing on Su Zimo's chest in the next moment. That punch came without warning and was more like a sneak attack. Furthermore, it was so fast that nobody could react to it except for Su Zimo. It was no wonder why Pei Chunyu was a legacy disciple of Glass Palace and a top foundation establishment cultivator. The timing of his attack was perfect. Tang Yu's appearance attracted even Su Zimo's attention. That moment when Su Zimo was slightly distracted, Pei Chunyu attacked. If not for his spirit perception, that punch would have been enough to claim Su Zimo's life. However, even with his spirit perception, Su Zimo was a step slower and could not draw a blood quencher in time to defend. He could only take the blow with his bare hands. When she saw that, Tang Yu's eyes dimmed. Even if Su Zimo reacted, the result would not change much. Pei Chunyu's cultivation realm was 2 levels higher than Su Zimo to begin with, and Glass Palace's body tempering techniques were the best in Tianhuang mainland. Pei Chunyu's strength was only higher than Su Zimo's. More importantly, Pei Chunyu had a perfect spirit weapon in his hands while Su Zimo had a body of flesh and blood. From Tang Yu's point of view, Su Zimo was most likely going to be beaten to death. If his luck was good, then he would be able to escape with his life, yet that arm of his would surely be crippled, causing his combat strength to decline sharply, and his path of cultivation might even stop because of this. Bang! When their fists collided, a muffled sound rang out, as if they had been defeated. The brilliance of the perfect spirit artifact suddenly vanished. Pei Chunyu did not move. Su Zimo's body shook violently. He staggered back 3 steps before he could stop himself. With every step, he would instinctively use the stance of the plow heaven stride to shift his center of gravity, leaving 3 deep footprints on the ground. The earth quaked. Su Zimo's fist was badly mangled and the bones within could be vaguely seen. They were not white but blood-red bones. Everyone's jaws dropped and their eyeballs nearly popped out as they looked at everything in disbelief. He was not dead. His arm was not crippled as well. His fist was merely bleeding and slightly injured. How was that possible? Even superior-grade spirit weapons would be smashed into pieces if they were struck by that punch. How could Su Zimo's body of flesh and blood be? The surrounding cultivators were completely dumbfounded. If they had not witnessed it with their own eyes, none of them would have believed it. The fiend heir of malevolent earth sect, Shuiyang, frowned slightly and looked at Su Zimo's right hand in deep thought. Pei Chunyu's pupils constricted slightly as he retracted his palm and placed it behind his back. Hee. Looking at Pei Chunyu's palm behind his back, Su Zimo suddenly burst into laughter. Apart from him, no one else knew exactly what had happened when the 2 of them clashed. Although Su Zimo's body was strong, there was no way he could withstand the power of a perfect spirit weapon. In that situation, even if Su Zimo was in his demon form, his strength would only increase by a level. However, he would not be able to defend against a perfect spirit weapon. It was as though a child had grown into an adult and his strength had increased multiple times. However, his body of flesh and blood was still unable to defend against the sharpness of a sharp saber. However, there was something special about Su Zimo's body. His right hand. The exterior of his right hand was flesh and blood. However, within it was a blood-bone palm of unknown origin. It was indestructible and even the sharpness of blood quencher could not sever it. Therefore, although Pei Chunyu had the upper hand in terms of strength in that exchange and pushed Su Zimo back by 3 steps, Su Zimo was not injured at all. In reality, Su Zimo did not suffer much of an impact and merely suffered some superficial injuries. However, Pei Chunyu suffered a hidden loss and the pain was unbearable. Nobody noticed that Pei Chunyu's palm behind his back was trembling slightly under the cover of his sleeves. The feeling of punching an iron plate was not good. In that short period of time, Tang Yu had already arrived and descended between the 2 of them with Uncle Liang following closely behind. Fellow Taoist Su, are you alright? Tang Yu was confused and could not help but ask hesitantly as she looked at Su Zimo behind her. I'm fine. Su Zimo shook his head. Are you really fine? Tang Yu withdrew an elixir from her storage bag and handed it over, whispering, Don't force yourself. Are you suffering from internal injuries? Swallow this elixir and stabilize your injuries first. Su Zimo smiled faintly and shook his head in rejection. Pei Chunyu, what's the meaning of this? Tang Yu turned around and questioned with a sharp gaze. I told you that Elixir Yang's sect is protecting this person. Why did you attack him? Fu. Pei Chunyu chuckled and replied casually, I saw that fellow Daoist Su's physique is strong and your melee combat strength is extraordinary. I was merely curious and wanted to spar. Why are you so nervous, fellow Daoist Tang Yu? Spar? Tang Yu scoffed coldly. Pei Chunyu's punch was clearly meant to take Su Zimo's life. Previously, he was humiliated by Su Zimo's berating, and now that he suffered a hidden loss, there was no way Pei Chunyu would give up. He was still looking for an opportunity to kill Su Zimo here. There was nothing to fear about Tang Yu before him. However, when he caught sight of the old man behind Tang Yu, a look of fear flashed through his eyes. Pei Chunyu took a deep breath of air and sighed internally. With Elixir Yang's sect's interference, it was most likely unrealistic for him to kill Su Zimo today. Furthermore, the fiend heir of Malevolent Earth's sect was watching coldly from the sidelines. This was not the right time to get into a conflict with Elixir Yang's sect, or Malevolent Earth's sect would be able to take advantage of it. At that thought, Pei Chunyu cupped his fists towards Tang Yu and looked deeply at Su Zimo, saying with a fake smile, fellow Daoist, there's still plenty of time for us to spar in the future. Pei Chunyu emphasized the word spar. Su Zimo smiled gently and replied indifferently, the next time we spar, I'll take your dog life. Ha ha ha. Pei Chunyu reared his head in laughter and said repeatedly, good. I'll wait for you. With that said, he waved his sleeves and left with the Glass Palace cultivators. On the other side, Shuiyang retreated as well. In the blink of an eye, the two top factions in Xiantian City had retreated completely, as though they had never appeared. Ji Qingtian and the others heaved a sigh of relief. Unknowingly, the four of them were already drenched in cold sweat. Chapter 380. On the long street, the remaining desperados fled in all directions, unable to fight back and no longer a threat. It was fortunate that Tang Yu had returned. Otherwise, once Su Zimo took on his demon form, a bloody battle would break out once more and everything would go out of control with unimaginable consequences. Tang Yu took out some elixirs from her storage bag and handed them to Ji Qingtian and the others. The four of them did not decline. Although they had healing elixirs in their storage bags as well, they were definitely not as effective as Elixir Yang's sects. When it was handed to Su Zimo, he took a look and shook his head gently without consuming it. What's wrong? Tang Yu was puzzled and asked, you're rather injured as well. These elixirs will be of great help to your injuries. Don't worry, the elixirs of Elixir Yang's sect are definitely the best in Tianhuang mainland. Tang Yu's words were not wrong. The spiritual pills she took out were all of decent quality. They were all high-grade spiritual pills. However, ever since Su Zimo started cultivating, he had always adhered to a principle: if he consumed elixirs, they had to be perfect grade. That was because only perfect grade elixirs had pure medicinal properties without any impurities. Su Zimo would not be moved even if it was supreme grade elixirs, let alone superior grade elixirs. Smiling, Su Zimo did not explain and merely declined politely. Although it seemed like Su Zimo was severely injured in this battle with more than 30 wounds on his body and was covered in blood, in reality, his foundation was not injured at all. His organs were intact and his tendons and bones were fine. In that short period of time, Su Zimo's wounds had already healed and he was no longer bleeding. Given his frightening regeneration capabilities, he would be able to recover fully in a few days. Xiantian City could be roughly divided into 4 regions. The East City was occupied by Glass Palace, the West City by Malevolent Earth Sect and the South City by the heretical factions. The cultivators in the North City were more chaotic. Initially, apart from Elixir Yang's sect and Chiguramon of the unorthodox groups, the 4 mounted bandits were the strongest. But now that the 4 mounted bandits were dead, most of the remaining desperados were buried on the streets and only a small portion of them managed to escape from Xiantian City. Those desperados were exhausted, wounded and reeking of blood. If they were to wander outside the city, they might not even make it through the first night before they were devoured by the various ferocious beasts and ancient living beings, leaving nothing behind. With the 4 mounted bandits removed, North City fell under the control of Dan Yang's sect and Chiguramon's sect. Before the bloody battle on the Long Street, Tang Yu had already thought highly of Su Zimo and made a promise to help Su Zimo deal with the 4 mounted bandits. At that time, this decision seemed too crazy and irrational. And now, not only the Dan Yang sect, but also the other cultivators knew that the Dan Yang sect had made a huge profit this time. Without suffering any casualties, he had managed to recruit a powerful cultivator with terrifying potential like Su Zimo as his subordinate. Furthermore, he had eliminated the 4 mounted bandits, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. 10 days later. North City, Dan Yang sect's meeting hall. Over the past few days, Ji Qingtian and the other 3 had mostly recovered from their injuries and Su Zimo had already made a full recovery a few days ago. Su Zimo's group of 6, Tang Yu, Uncle Liang and a cultivator of Dan Yang's sect's battle hall, Yan Jun, were gathered here. Today, I've called all of you here because I want to talk about some information regarding an ancient ruin. Tang Yu said in a deep voice, since I'm here to ask for your help, I'll tell you everything I know without hiding anything. Su Zimo and the others nodded, they could see Tang Yu's sincerity. In order to help Ji Qingtian and the others recuperate, Dan Yang's sect had provided many elixirs of extremely high quality. In reality, this ruin is related to a major sect of the ancient era called Elixir Pool's sect. The name alone was enough to tell that the sect had something to do with elixir refinement. Indeed, Tang Yu continued, Elixir Pool's sect was extremely famous in the ancient era and was one of the top elixir refinement sects in Tianhuang mainland. The ancestral master of Elixir Yang's sect was an elixir refinement master of Elixir Pool's sect. When they heard that, Su Zimo and the others were shocked. The elixir refinement master of Elixir Pool's sect established his own sect and became one of the 4 unorthodox groups of Tianhuang mainland, Elixir Yang sect. How strong was Elixir Pool's sect in the past? The ruins of Elixir Pool's sect have extraordinary significance. Tang Yu said in a deep voice with a stern expression, not only will there be a large number of elixirs in the ruins, there will also be many lost elixir formulas. Su Zimo nodded silently. There were way too many things that were lost from the ancient era until now. The reason why the Meridian Unlocking Elixir was so precious was because its elixir formula had been lost for a long time. What did it mean if they could obtain the elixir formula of the Meridian Unlocking Elixir in the ruins of Elixir Pool's sect? Of course, apart from elixir formulas, if you're lucky, you might be able to obtain the inheritance of some sects in the ruins. Such inheritances are much more precious than elixir formulas. However, the chances of that happening are extremely low. Unless you have a token of Elixir Pool's sect that allows you to obtain the acknowledgement of the sect. Tang Yu smiled bitterly. Even elixir formulas were lost for sects of the ancient era, let alone tokens. When he heard that, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Instinctively, Xiaoning looked towards Su Zimo with a strange expression and hesitated to speak. Su Zimo lowered his gaze, pretending that he did not see anything. In reality, both he and Xiaoning thought of the same thing at the same time. The mysterious elixir furnace on Xiaoning. After entering the ancient battlefield, the elixir furnace gave off an abnormal reaction. That was the reason why Su Zimo led Xiaoning in this direction. Now that they received news of the Elixir Pool sect ruins, the 2 of them could not help but connect the dots with the elixir furnace. However, this was too sensitive a matter. A man's wealth was his own ruin. Now that there were so many people around, if this matter was revealed, it would definitely bring about trouble and even Elixir Yang's sect might take the risk. At the end of the day, Xiaoning was simple-minded and did not think too much about it, revealing an odd expression. However, Su Zimo knew how dangerous the cultivation world was and did not meet Xiaoning's gaze, merely shaking his head without batting an eyelid. Xiaoning was smart as well and retracted her gaze without saying anything. Even so, there were still people who noticed Xiaoning's reaction. The battle hall cultivator Yen Jun, who was standing behind Tang Yu, raised his brow and suddenly asked, "Fellow Daoist Xiaoning, you seem to have something to say about the sect's inheritance?" "And nothing." Xiaoning looked flustered after her thoughts were exposed and her eyes flickered. Tang Yu frowned slightly and suddenly asked, "Xiaoning, you want to ask if Elixir Pool's sect has an elixir formula that can increase one's lifespan, right?" "Ah, that's right." Xiaoning nodded hurriedly. Tang Yu chuckled and said gently, "Don't worry, Elixir Pool's sect definitely has such an elixir formula. However, we might not be able to obtain it. It's all up to fate." "Oh." Xiaoning nodded and replied. With Tang Yu's interruption, Yen Jun looked at Xiaoning in confusion. He assumed that he was overthinking and did not continue asking. Raising his head, Su Zimo swept his gaze and glanced at Tang Yu discreetly. At that moment, Tang Yu was looking at him meaningfully. Her eyes were like water with light flowing through them, and she had a fake smile on her face. What a formidable woman! Su Zimo sighed internally. Since Yen Jun could sense that something was amiss with Xiaoning, Tang Yu could clearly tell as well. Furthermore, just now, Tang Yu was clearly changing the topic out of kindness to attract Yen Jun's attention and help Xiaoning out. The two of them exchanged glances. They knew what was going on and did not expose her. Chapter 381. In reality, Su Zimo was already tempted when he heard about the Elixir Pool sect ruins. It was not only because of Xiaoning, he had his own needs as well. The Meridian Unlocking Elixir. Furthermore, it was a perfect-grade Meridian Unlocking Elixir. After hearing Tang Yu's introduction of Elixir Pool sect, Su Zimo was even more certain that there was a high chance of finding a perfect-grade Meridian Unlocking Elixir in the Elixir Pool sect ruins. Tang Yu said, "Of course, a major sect like Elixir Pool sect will definitely have other treasures as well. Who knows, there might even be treasures like connate spirit weapons." Su Zimo thought for a moment. "I'll do my best to help Elixir Yang sect fight for the ruins. Furthermore, I don't want anything else except for a perfect-grade Meridian Unlocking Elixir!" Yen Jun could not help but burst out in laughter as he looked at Su Zimo mockingly. "A perfect-grade Meridian Unlocking Elixir? You sure are greedy. Who do you think you are, huh? Who are you?" Su Zimo glared at him. Yen Jun declared proudly, "I am Yen Jun, a cultivator of Elixir Yang sect's battle hall at 7 Meridian Foundation establishment. Also, don't think that you have the right to negotiate with Elixir Yang sect just because you killed 2 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators. Su Zimo, let me tell you, without Elixir Yang sect, you won't even be able to get close to the main hall of Elixir Pool sect." Yen Jun. Tang Yu glared at him sternly. Yen Jun harumphed and did not say anything else, merely crossing his arms and sneering coldly. Tang Yu turned around with an apologetic expression. "Fellow Daoist Su, it's not impossible for you to have a perfect-grade Meridian Unlocking Elixir, but what?" Su Zimo asked. Tang Yu continued, "Elixir Yang sect is not the only faction in Shantian City that is here for the Elixir Pool sect ruins. There are also powerful sects such as Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth sect. As for the perfect-grade Meridian Unlocking Elixir, it's fine if we don't have it. However, once we find it, it will definitely attract the top cultivators of various factions to fight for it." In other words, Tang Yu meant that Su Zimo would have to face many strong opponents if he wanted to fight for the perfect Meridian Unlocking Elixir. Tang Yu thought for a while and said, "I'll be frank. For example, Pei Chunyu of Glass Palace and Shui Yang of Malevolent Earth sect, unless they discover a connate spirit weapon, no other treasures or secret skills would catch their eye. They are most likely here for the perfect Meridian Unlocking Pill. The higher the grade of the Meridian Unlocking Pill, the higher the chances of unlocking the spirit meridians. At Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang's cultivation realms, they were already at the peak of 7 Meridian Foundation establishment. The only way for them to have the greatest chance of unlocking their 8th spirit meridian was by consuming perfect Meridian Unlocking Elixirs. It was impossible for them to miss such an opportunity." At the thought of Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang, Su Zimo frowned. He had exchanged blows with Pei Chunyu before. Although it was only one move, he could feel how terrifying his opponent was. To be fair, if he had not used the blood-bone palm previously, his arm might have been crippled by Pei Chunyu's punch. Tang Yu said, although you killed 2 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators, you have to know that there's a difference in strength between them. For example, I'm at 7 Meridian Foundation establishment but I'm an elixir refinement master. Even if there were 5 of me, we wouldn't be a match for Chai Li and Hu Meng. However, for 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators like Chai Li and Hu Meng, even if there were 10 of them, they wouldn't be a match for Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang. That's the difference. Su Zimo remained silent. He knew that Tang Yu was right. If he did not take on his demon form, his chances of winning against those two were slim. Uncle Liang added, the Immortal and Fiend sects have a long history and possess way too many cultivation techniques and secret skills. Every single one of them is extremely powerful and can suppress everything. Your advantage lies in melee combat. However, it's unfortunate that you encountered Glass Palace. The successor of Glass Palace specializes in melee combat as well and his physique is unparalleled in Tianhuang mainland. Only a few successors of other sects can match him. Tang Yu continued, when you killed Chai Li and Hu Meng, you took advantage of the timing and borrowed the power of thunder and lightning, which is a bit of a trick. However, against Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang, can you guarantee that there will be a thunderstorm on that day? In other words, even if you can release that thunderous slash, Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang might not be able to defend against it given their strength. Yan Jun could not help but comment, Junior sister, you're overestimating him. Let alone paragons like Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang, he's not even a match for legacy disciples of Chiguramon and Puppet sect. Not to mention others, even I, Yan Jun, can easily defeat him. In Yan Jun's eyes, Su Zimo killed Chai Li and Hu Meng 10 days ago because he took advantage of the right time. If it was a sunny day, he would definitely be able to kill Su Zimo. Su Zimo could not be bothered with Yan Jun's mockery. In Su Zimo's opinion, it was not difficult for him to defeat Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang. That was because he had just advanced to 5 Meridian Foundation establishment and his mouth and eye orifices had yet to be unlocked among his 7 orifices. Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang were already at the peak of 7 Meridian Foundation establishment and it would be difficult for them to advance further. However, his potential was limitless. As long as he had enough time, he would definitely be able to crush Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang in terms of strength once he reached 6 or 7 Meridian Foundation establishment or if he cleared the 7 orifices in his head and attained lesser mastery of the orifice clearing section. Su Zimo asked, how long more before the Elixir Pool sect ruins opens? A month at most. Tang Yu replied. A month. Su Zimo frowned slightly. It was too short. He had just advanced to 5 Meridian Foundation establishment and even in the ancient battlefield, it was impossible for him to unlock his 6th Spirit Meridian within a month. Furthermore, it was impossible for him to unlock his mouth and eye orifices in a month's time. Right then, Uncle Liang seemed to have thought of something as he looked at Su Zimo and suddenly said, actually, there's a place in the ancient battlefield that's rather suitable for you. If you can succeed, you might be able to fight against Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang. Tang Yu's heart skipped a beat as she looked at Uncle Liang and asked, Uncle Liang, you're talking about that place? Yes, Uncle Liang nodded and smiled. Forget it, there's no way you can succeed. I was thinking too much. Tang Yu nodded as well. If it's that place, the chances are indeed slim. There's no need for that. Even with Su Zimo's temperament, he was curious when he heard how ambiguous the two of them were. He could not help but ask, Senior, young Master Tang, what's the name of this place that you're talking about? Tang Yu did not intend to hide it and asked instead, fellow Daoist, have you heard of the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea? Saber Mountain Spirit Sea? Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly and shook his head. Ji Qingtian and the others were confused as well. It was clear that they knew nothing about that place. Foo-foo. Yan Jun sneered, after all, you're cultivators from a small place and haven't even heard of the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea. What a joke! Chapter 382. Each time the cultivators of the Great Zhou dynasty entered the ancient battlefield, they would linger at the periphery. How could they have heard of the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea? If not for the fact that Su Zimo brought Ji Qingtian and the others here, they might not have even heard of Shentian City or had the chance to meet major sects like Elixir Yang Sect and Glass Palace in their entire lives. This was an extremely precious experience that opened their horizons completely. Su Zimo and Yan Jun had never crossed paths before. However, the latter treated him harshly and mocked him whenever he had the chance. As for the reason, Su Zimo could roughly guess in his heart. However, this person was a cultivator of Elixir Yang's sect after all and had not crossed his bottom line. As such, Su Zimo could not be bothered with him. Tang Yu frowned slightly and glared at Yan Jun with a warning look before saying slowly, "The reason why the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea is famous is because it's related to an ancient legend." Through Tang Yu's tone, it was clear that the legend was not simple. The expressions of Su Zimo and the others froze as they sat upright, listening intently. Tang Yu said word by word, "That legend is the legend of the Saber Emperor." Saber Emperor. The voids trembled the moment she said those two words, as though dark cracks were being torn apart with cold winds howling endlessly. Those two words alone carried with them an inexplicable might that was ancient and boundless, as though it had transcended through the ages with an indestructible will that shocked everyone. Instantly, a murderous intent surged through the hall. Everyone felt as though their breathing had become much more difficult. It took a long time for that feeling to dissipate gradually. Tang Yu took a deep breath of air and said, "The Emperor is invincible, supreme and unique. In the Tao of the Saber, he is invincible and there is no one else above him. He is the Emperor of the Saber Emperor. The Saber Emperor might not be the number one expert of Tianhuang mainland. However, in the Tao of the Saber, he is the only emperor among all saber cultivators." Su Zimo understood. There might be many emperors in an era. However, in a certain domain or Tao, there could only be a single emperor. That was the meaning of an emperor, invincible, supreme and unique. The emperor of the immortal Tao was the immortal emperor, the emperor of the fiend Tao was the fiend emperor, the emperor of the sword Tao was the sword emperor. Based on that, those who could become emperors were definitely the strongest cultivators of Tianhuang mainland. Everyone knows that the sword reigns supreme in Tianhuang mainland right now and cultivators use flying swords as an offensive weapon. Swords and sabers have their own emperors. Swords had their own Daos and saber Daos. Swords had their own Daos and sabers had their own Daos. Swords had their own Daos and saber Daos and saber Daos and saber Daos of. Swords had their own Daos and saber Daos of saber Daos, each Dao's Dao and saber Dao. However, in the ancient era, the fortune of the human race was strong and countless paragons were born in Tianhuang mainland. Emperors rose and that was a golden era that belonged to the human race. An epic war once broke out between the human race and the other races, known as the Ancient War. The war lasted for a long time and countless human experts and ancient mighty figures died. The emperors were stained with blood in an extremely tragic manner. Although the war ended with the victory of the human race, most of the Tao of weapons were lost in the ancient battlefield and their paths were severed. The two strongest lineages left were the Tao of the sword and saber. When they heard that, Su Zimo and the others were shocked. They had heard about those ancient secrets and legends before and were filled with curiosity now that they heard about it. Although it was only a few words, it was as though a magnificent era was outlined before everyone's eyes. In fact, Su Zimo even had an urge to return to the river of time and go against the flow to follow in the footsteps of the predecessors to witness that glorious history. Tang Yu continued, "The reason why those two lineages were able to survive from the ancient war is naturally because of two people, the Sword Emperor and the Saber Emperor. There are way too many legends about those two experts. Some say that they were mortal enemies, some say that they were best friends and some say that they were both friends and foes who appreciated each other. No matter what, the final conclusion is that the Saber Emperor fled far away and left Tianhuang mainland. After that, there were no emperors for weapons in Tianhuang mainland and only the Tao of the sword reigned. That was how the current situation of the cultivation world was formed. Su Zimo and the others heaved a long sigh of relief, unable to calm down for a long time. It was only at this moment that they realized why most cultivators in the cultivation world used flying swords and not weapons such as flying sabers. So, that was the reason. Tang Yu said, the legacy left behind by the Sword Emperor back then is the current sword sect of the 9 immortal sects. Su Zimo was secretly shocked. Initially, he thought that super sects such as the 9 immortal sects, 7 fiend sects and 6 Buddhist monasteries were known as the top factions of Tianhuang mainland because they had a long history and a strong foundation. But now, it seemed like the sects that were ranked had shocking backgrounds. For example, the founder of Sword Sect of the 9 immortal sects was the Sword Emperor of the ancient era. In fact, he could even influence the later generations and form the current situation where the Tao of the sword reigned supreme in the cultivation world. After pondering for a moment, Su Zimo suddenly asked, where did the Saber Emperor go? Tang Yu smiled gently. The Saber Emperor drifted overseas and found an isolated island in the sea where he left his legacy. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he blurted out, one of the 2 islands. The top factions of Tianhuang mainland were the 9 immortal sects, 8 demon regions, 7 fiend sects, 6 Buddhist monasteries, 5 heretical doctrines, 4 unorthodox groups, 3 aristocratic families, 2 islands and 1 palace. That's right. A look of admiration flashed through Tang Yu's eyes as she nodded. The legacy left behind by the Saber Emperor is one of the 2 islands, Divine Phoenix Island. The successor of Divine Phoenix Island rarely sets foot in Tianhuang mainland. However, each time a successor of Divine Phoenix Island appears, they are all unparalleled and peerless paragons. They will definitely cause a huge commotion in the cultivation world. Su Zimo lamented. From that perspective, the Saber Emperor did not lose back then. The legacy left behind by the Sword Emperor was one of the immortal sects and the legacy of the Saber Emperor was one of the 2 islands. Be it in terms of reputation, status or strength, they were not weaker than Sword Sect. What has the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea got to do with the Saber Emperor? Su Zimo asked. Tang Yu explained, it said that when the Saber Emperor left Tianhuang mainland, he left behind his legacy, which is the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea in the ancient battlefield. Although the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea does exist, no cultivator has been able to obtain the legacy throughout history. Countless paragons have appeared during this period of time but all of them ended in failure. Gradually, the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea turned into a legend and no one believed in it anymore, until... Pausing for a moment, Tang Yu continued, about 1,000 years ago, a monstrous cultivator appeared in the ancient battlefield. Although he did not come from the super sects of Tianhuang mainland, his combat strength was heaven-defying and he could fight against the legacy disciples of the various major sects. It's said that he obtained the Saber Emperor's legacy in the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea. Su Zimo frowned slightly and asked, if the Saber Emperor's legacy was obtained by that person, is the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea still around? I don't know the exact reason either, but it's still around. Tang Yu nodded. You're considered a saber cultivator and the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea is the most suitable for you. It can also allow your combat strength to rise rapidly. Of course, there's a prerequisite for that, you have to obtain the Saber Emperor's legacy. Chapter 383. When he heard that, Su Zimo had already made up his mind to make a trip to the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea. Up till this point of his cultivation, even though Su Zimo used the saber, he knew nothing about saber techniques. He only knew how to rely on the strength of his bloodline and his physique to slash wildly. Thankfully, he cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness all year round. His skin was thick and he was agile like an ape, pouncing like a tiger, sprinting like a horse, rising like the wind and landing like an arrow. His body was both tough and soft. Coupled with the help of his spirit perception, he could sense danger and avoid without seeing or hearing. He was rarely at a disadvantage. However, Su Zimo knew very well that if he were to meet a top expert, even if they were weaker than him in terms of strength, it would be easy for them to find the flaws in his saber techniques and defeat him. Therefore, even if there was only a 1 in a million chance, Su Zimo had to give it a try. When he saw that Su Zimo was tempted, Yan Jun sneered at the side. Countless cultivators have headed to the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea, and there's no lack of young paragons. However, in history, only a single person has succeeded. You're just a frog in a well who hasn't even heard of the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea. How can you be fit to obtain the inheritance of the Saber Emperor? Tang Yu was already displeased by Yan Jun's repeated targeting of Su Zimo. However, she was slightly relieved when she saw Su Zimo's calm expression without any reaction. There's something else I have to remind you of, Tang Yu said in a low voice. I don't know much about the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea either. After all, there's already someone who obtained the inheritance of the Saber Emperor 1,000 years ago. If you head there now, you might end up making a wasted trip. It's fine, Su Zimo smiled indifferently. Fellow Daoist, it's truly fascinating to listen to the ancient legends that you've told me about. During the ancient war, dragons and serpents rose and various emperors rose. It was a golden age. It's a pity that I wasn't born in that era and wasn't able to leave my name in history alongside the emperors. The moment he said that, the hall went silent. Everyone's jaws dropped slightly in shock. Boldness. How much boldness did it take to leave one's name in history alongside the emperors? Such words coming out of the mouth of a Foundation establishment cultivator was simply laughable, arrogant, and ignorant. But for some reason, when Su Zimo said these words, he was clearly not filled with hot-bloodedness, nor was he filled with unparalleled heroism, yet he seemed so natural. It was as though this scholarly green-robed cultivator was indeed qualified to stand shoulder to shoulder with the emperors. Even Yan Jun, who held a grudge against Su Zimo, could not utter a single word of mockery. Just now, even if he was asked to repeat those words, he wouldn't dare to say it out loud. He was worried that misfortune would befall him. Even if he was an emperor who had fallen since ancient times, his dignity could not be blasphemed. Uncle Liang gave Su Zimo a deep look. Originally, he had looked down on Su Zimo. However, earlier on, Uncle Liang had discarded all of his previous impressions of Su Zimo. Su Zimo did not notice the strange gazes of the people around him and was merely immersed in his emotions. Shaking his head gently, he lamented, "Time is merciless throughout history. Be it the sword or saber emperors, they have already passed away along with their eras, leaving only legends behind. Since I no longer have the chance to witness the glory of the Saber Emperor, I might as well pay my respects to him at the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea. Even if I can't obtain the inheritance, I can use the ruins to reminisce about the glory of the past and make up for my regrets." Tang Yu nodded. "Since you've already made up your mind, I won't stop you. However, you'll have to return to Xiantian City within a month to help us fight for the Elixir Pool sect ruins." "Sure," Su Zimo nodded. Right then, an Elixir Yang sect cultivator strode over and entered the hall with cupped fists. "Young Master, Feng Manman of Chiguramon requests an audience." "Sister Manman." Pondering for a moment, Tang Yu's gaze shifted and paused on Ling Ro for a moment before nodding. "Invite her in." Tang Yu explained to Su Zimo and the others, the four unorthodox groups have a good relationship. Sister Manman is the commander of Chiguramon's expedition and I've known her for many years. Right then, a woman in a long white dress strode over from not far away. She had a voluptuous figure with exquisite curves and light footsteps. Her black hair was tied up in a cloud bun, giving her a mature and dignified appearance. Her features were exquisite and she was extremely beautiful. On the woman's waist, other than a storage bag, there was also a pink paper crane tied to it. It was very beautiful. Tang Yu went over and smiled. "Sister Manman, come in quickly." Feng Manman glanced at Tang Yu and smiled. "Why are you still dressed like that? You're already so old." "I'm used to it," Tang Yu blinked. "Xiao Yu, I won't beat around the bush. I'm here for someone." Feng Manman did not beat around the bush and said directly. "It's for her, right?" Tang Yu's gaze swept and landed on Ling Ro. Feng Manman smiled. I still can't hide it from you. Me? Ling Ro was slightly stunned. Feng Man nodded and said with a gentle gaze, I can tell that you have talent in talismans and I can't bear to bury it. I'd like to invite you to join the Chiguramon. What do you think? Ling Ro loved creating talismans and indeed wanted to join the Chiguramon. However, she did not expect the other party to take the initiative to approach her. Furthermore, she could tell that this Chiguramon cultivator was truly sincere. Right then, another Elixir Yang sect cultivator arrived and cupped his fists. Ingze of Puppet Sect in the city south requests an audience. Puppet Sect, one of the 5 heretical doctrines. Please. Tang Yu nodded. Not long after, a robust man strode into the main hall. He had short hair and wore linen clothes. He looked honest. After entering the door, he grinned and cupped his fists. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Tang Yu whispered to Su Zimo, his name is Ingze and he's the commander of Puppet Sect for this trip. Su Zimo nodded. Young Master Tang, I'm here today to invite someone to join our Puppet Sect. I wonder if that's alright. Ingze went straight to the point. Oh? Tang Yu smiled. Who's the one you fancy? Ingze pointed to Shi Jian who was drinking tea at the side. It's him. Shi Jian was stunned and had a confused expression, he did not know why someone would fancy him. Ingze grinned. This fool is not bad. He's to my liking. Ha ha ha. Little Fatty could not help but burst into laughter. Shi Jian's expression darkened as he gripped his fists and emphasized, I'm not stupid, I'm just honest. Yes. Ingze nodded and paused for a moment. Same meaning. Shi Jian, Little Fatty laughed even more merrily. Sun Dian of Toon Sect requests an audience. Toon Sect, one of the 5 heretical doctrines. Please. Before long, a pale-faced cultivator entered the hall. He had a sharp mouth and monkey cheeks while his eyes darted around. When he caught sight of Little Fatty, his eyes lit up. Sun Dian winked at Little Fatty. Curious, Little Fatty leaned over. The two of them, one fat and one skinny, ran to a corner and muttered something. The Little Fatty nodded his head repeatedly. His eyes shone brightly and he licked his lips like a starving wolf. When he saw that, Su Zimo smiled gently and was filled with joy, he was happy for Ling Ro and the others. Su Zimo was not the only one who gained the recognition of many cultivators in the bloody battle on the Long Street, there were 4 others as well. Back then, they chose to return to Xiantian City with the intention of dying. Initially, it was a huge calamity. To think that they would receive an opportunity that belonged to them today. Fortune and misfortune came hand in hand and that was how karma worked. Chapter 384. Ling Ro and the others turned to Su Zimo instinctively. Even though they fought for this opportunity on the Long Street, the main reason was because of Su Zimo. If not for Su Zimo, they would have died along the way before even reaching Xiantian City. Su Zimo nodded with a smile. Be it Chiguramon, Puppet Sect and Toon Sect that appeared later on, everyone that came to greet them were the commanders of this expedition and legacy disciples of their respective sections. That alone was enough to show the sincerity of the 3 sections. Since we're all in Xiantian City, we can meet at any time. I'll make a move first. Little Fatty was chatting passionately with Sun Dian of Toon Sect and left after bidding farewell to everyone. I'll make a move too then. Shi Jian rubbed his head and followed behind Ingze of Puppet Sect, leaving the hall. Ling Ro nodded to Su Zimo as a form of greeting before leaving with Feng Man of Chiguramon. Tang Yu looked at Ji Qingtian and blinked, saying cheekily, seems like I'll have to send out an invitation in advance. Otherwise, you'll be poached by other sects as well. If you don't mind, I'm willing to join Elixir Yang sect, Ji Qingtian said with a smile. Tang Yu's gaze shifted to Su Zimo and she asked expectantly, what about you? Even though Su Zimo promised her that he would help Elixir Yang sect fight for the Elixir Pool sect ruins, he did not say that he wanted to join Elixir Yang sect. I'm different from them. Su Zimo shook his head and rejected her tactfully without explaining further. Even though she had expected it, Tang Yu was still disappointed when she heard that reply. Su Zimo cupped his fists. There's no time to lose. I'll head to the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea right now and try to return as soon as possible. Be careful on your way. Tang Yu exhorted. Su Zimo turned and left, vanishing before everyone's eyes before long. This was Su Zimo's first appearance in Shantian City since the bloody battle on the Long Street 10 days ago, which immediately attracted countless gazes. There was reverence, envy, and curiosity. Do you see that? That scholarly green-robed cultivator is Su Zimo. It's him. I thought he was born with 3 heads and 6 arms. There were many cultivators in Shantian City who had never seen Su Zimo before, but there were very few who had never heard of his name. Su Zimo walked on the street. As long as his ears moved slightly, he could hear the discussions coming from several streets away. Su Zimo did not care about this. However, Su Zimo hadn't walked far when his heart skipped a beat. Under these strange gazes, Su Zimo sensed a hint of murderous intent that followed him like a shadow. Remnants of the 4 mounted bandits? Or, the tree wants to be still, but the wind will not stop. To think that there would still be people who had designs on him after the bloody battle on the Long Street. Su Zimo was expressionless and sneered internally as he walked towards the east gate of Shantian City without stopping. That murderous intent followed him the entire time. Not long after Su Zimo left the city, another murderous intent appeared. Su Zimo sprinted the entire way at a moderate speed. About 2 hours later, Su Zimo was already far away from Shantian City and the surroundings were empty and desolate. Right then, the sound of clothes fluttering could be heard from behind him. Su Zimo stopped in his tracks and turned back. In the distant horizon, 2 figures tore through the air at an extremely fast speed with a murderous aura. Su Zimo narrowed his gaze and looked at the sect badges on the waists of the 2 figures. He could not help but sneer and murmur, "It's them indeed." During the bloody battle on the Long Street, Su Zimo killed 2 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators. Even though he had the advantage of timing, ordinary cultivators would not dare to provoke him. Furthermore, he had the backing of Elixir Yang's sect. However, there were 2 major sects in Shantian City that had the strength and reason to cause trouble for him. Glass Palace of the Immortal Sects and Malevolent Earth Sect of the Fiend Sects. Back then, he rejected Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang in front of everyone and embarrassed both of them. Given their statuses, there was no way they would let the matter rest. Since Su Zimo was in Elixir Yang's sect, it was naturally not convenient for Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth Sect to make a move. The moment he left the city, the cultivators of the 2 major sects chased after him. The fact that Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth Sect only sent 2 people was proof of their acknowledgement of the strength of the 2. In reality, if Tang Yu was here, she would definitely be able to recognize them. The Glass Palace cultivator's name was Lu Yun and the Malevolent Earth Sect cultivator's name was Di Xing. Both of them were 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators and were the right-hand men of Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang. Their strength was extremely frightening. In the blink of an eye, Lu Yun and Di Xing had already closed in. Standing on their flying swords, they stood on both sides of the air and looked down at Su Zimo from above. Fu. Lu Yun chuckled softly with a mocking gaze. Su Zimo, why aren't you running anymore? Are you prepared to surrender since you know that you can't escape? Di Xing's gaze was cold. Su Zimo smiled. If he channeled his bloodline and used Divine Steed Fleeting to sprint at full speed, there was no way the 2 of them would be able to catch up to him given their speed. The 2 of them descended slowly from midair and maintained a certain distance from one another, wary of the other. Lu Yun was the first to speak and pointed at Su Zimo. Fellow Taoist, let's get the unpleasantness out of the way first. Once this man dies, we'll split the treasures in his storage bag equally. No problem, Di Xing nodded. Lu Yun rolled his eyes and said, this person's blood-red long saber, I want it. Since that's the case, that moon-white gigantic bow will belong to me, Di Xing said. The two of them were referring to the perfect-grade spirit weapon, Blood Quencher, and the quasi-connate spirit weapon, Moon Concealment Bow. The two of them did not take Su Zimo seriously at all and were already discussing how to split his storage bag. A look of mockery flashed through Su Zimo's eyes as he shook his head gently. Immortals and fiends had different daos. Since ancient times, the duty of immortals had always been to slay demons and purge fiends. But now, how was this immortal sect cultivator any different from someone from the fiend sects when he saw the face of him? "What are you guys doing?" Su Zimo asked indifferently. "Oh, I nearly forgot about you. Senior Brother Pei asked me to pass on a message." Turning around, Lu Yun revealed a sinister smile and said slowly, "If I want to kill someone, you'll definitely die." Di Xing's gaze was cold and murderous. "It's a favor for you to be Senior Brother Shui's guard. Since you don't know what's good for you, you can die." Fu. Su Zimo laughed and asked, "If you want my life, why don't Pei Qunyu and Shui Yang come personally? There's no need to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut." Di Xing revealed a look of disdain. Lu Yun scoffed, "There's no need for Senior Brother Pei to personally deal with a small fry like you." Ha 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 ha. Su Zimo reared his head in laughter. His laughter was loud and resonated through the voids like a huge bell. Both Lu Yun and Di Xing felt their ears prickling. Suddenly, Su Zimo stopped laughing and his eyes lit up with endless killing intent as he shouted, "You guys think that the two of you can take my life? Su Zimo, you're way too arrogant. Do you think that you're qualified to challenge me just because you killed Chai Li and Hu Meng?" As a Glass Palace disciple, Lu Yun took a deep breath of air fearlessly and channeled his spirit energy. Instantly, 7 spirit meridians appeared beneath his robes and surged with a majestic aura. "There's no need to say anything else. Hand over your lives." Su Zimo strode forward and whipped out Blood Quencher. A blood beam burst forth and enveloped Lu Yun and Di Xing within. Chapter 385. Splash! Splash! Su Zimo channeled his bloodline and the sound of a tsunami could be heard from within his body. His tendons and bones rang at the same time like thunder. 5 spirit lights shone on Blood Quencher, releasing a blinding light that resembled a blood-colored sun that streaked through the void with a sharp edge. That slash was extremely powerful and fast. If it was any ordinary cultivator, even a 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator, they would have been shocked. However, Lu Yun and Di Xing's expressions were unchanged. Instead, a look of mockery flashed through their eyes. Body like glass, clear inside and out, untainted and indestructible. Lu Yun stood on the spot, unmoving. He recited 4 sentences of 16 words, and with each word, his aura would change. Towards the end, Lu Yun's body seemed to be shrouded in a mysterious glow that was flawless like glass. At the same time, 4 spirit lights shone from Lu Yun's arms. It was a pair of arm guards, a supreme-grade spirit weapon. Glass Palace specialized in cultivating the physique, and if one cultivated their sect's secret manual, the Glass Heart Sutra, to its limits, one's body, eyes and heart would be like glass, indestructible, indestructible and indestructible with boundless strength that could even kill ferocious beasts bare-handed. Therefore, most of the weapons used by cultivators in Glass Palace were gauntlets, arm guards, and the like. Although arm guards were rare nowadays, they were one of the hundreds of weapons in the ancient era and were not to be underestimated. The advantage of arm guards was that they were flexible and when attached to one's arms, they could be used for both offense and defense and were truly at ease. In the blink of an eye, Lu Yun neither retreated nor dodged. Bending his legs slightly, he shifted his center of gravity and raised his arms to block the incoming Blood Quencher. Clang! An ear-piercing sound of metal clashing echoed. Lu Yun's body shrank and his feet sank deeply into the ground. However, he did not retreat a single step and his expression was unchanged. Blood Quencher was sent flying by a tremendous force as well. Su Zimo narrowed his gaze and his heart skipped a beat. On the surface, the two of them were evenly matched in that exchange. However, in reality, he had the advantage and his Blood Quencher was a grade higher than Lu Yun's arm guards. Even under such circumstances, he did not have the upper hand. This is a tough nut to crack. It's a little tricky. Su Zimo thought about it and realized that he might not be able to kill this person in a short period of time. He could not help but look at Di Xing, who was nearby. After that slash, Su Zimo made use of the remaining momentum of Blood Quencher to slash horizontally towards Di Xing of Malevolent Earth Sect at the side. The blood beam was blinding and the stench of blood filled the air. A few years ago, deep underground, Su Zimo had fought with a few fiend heirs and had some understanding of the fiend sections. Among the fiend sects, Overlord Palace was the strongest in body tempering, followed by Shura sect. The fiend heir of Malevolent Earth sect did not have a strong physical body. Su Zimo wanted to unleash a series of ferocious attacks to kill Di Xing before turning to deal with Lu Yun wholeheartedly. Hee. As though he had sensed Su Zimo's killing intent long ago, Di Xing laughed strangely and 7 spirit meridians appeared on his body. Spirit energy rumbled as he opened his mouth and spat out a black mist. It rumbled and was unpredictable with a menacing malevolent aura. Although he had not unlocked his eye orifice of the 7 orifices, Su Zimo's eyesight was extremely strong after cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. But now, against that black malevolent aura, Su Zimo's vision turned pitch black and his vision was obstructed. In that moment, he had already lost track of Di Xing Blood Quencher slashed against the malevolent aura, as though it had entered a swamp and could not move forward. Enveloped and corroded by the malevolent aura, the spirit light on the saber dimmed gradually and the blood beam on the saber showed signs of weakening as well. Humph! Su Zimo harumphed and held Blood Quencher horizontally in front of his chest. Channeling his bloodline, a ball of lightning appeared in his palm and he swiped it across the saber. The power of thunder was the most masculine and had the power to repel evil. It was extremely effective against malevolent auras. With a series of crackling sounds, the malevolent aura on Blood Quencher was purged by the thunder in Su Zimo's palm. 5 spirit patterns appeared on the saber once more and it regained its sharpness. Thunder. A look of fear flashed through Di Xing's eyes. In reality, the malevolent aura he spat out was not simple, it was one of the secret skills of Malevolent Earth Sect, the spirit-devouring malevolent aura. The spirit-devouring malevolent aura was extremely powerful and specialized in tainting spirit weapons. Once a spirit weapon was tainted by the spirit-devouring malevolent aura, the spirit chi on it would be devoured. If it was not purged for a long time, the spirit patterns would be erased and the spirit weapon would be almost crippled. Swoosh! Lu Yun dashed over from the side and his bloodline surged like mercury. An evil gust of wind blew behind him as he swung his arm and smashed down. With a sidestep, Su Zimo twisted his body and slashed in reverse. Clang! Sparks flew everywhere. Su Zimo's figure swayed. Making use of the rebound force from the clash, he crossed his legs and released Divine Steed Fleeting. With a murderous aura, he charged towards Di Xing who was not far away. Di Xing was different from Lu Yun. His physique was ordinary and he was not strong in melee combat. As long as Su Zimo could get close to him, he would definitely be able to slay him. As though he had already seen through Su Zimo's intentions, Di Xing smirked coldly. Go! Suddenly, Di Xing tossed out the bone spear in his hands and let it hover in midair. A pitch-black mist burst forth from his fingertips and entered the spear. The 10-section bone spear shone brightly and shone with 4 spirit patterns. Di Xing's fingers changed continuously as he conjured hand seals and hollered softly, "Go!" The moment he said that, the 10-section bone spear broke into 10 pure white bone spikes. Shrouded in malevolent aura, they shot towards Su Zimo instantly. Su Zimo had just released Divine Steed Fleeting when a sense of danger flashed through his mind. His vision blurred as the 10 bone spikes pierced towards him. The bone spikes were extremely sharp and shone with a cold glint. They were not weaker than other sharp weapons and would definitely leave a hole in his body if he was struck. The most frightening thing was that the attack of the 10 bone spikes was extremely precise and sealed off all of Su Zimo's escape routes. 8 different directions were occupied by 8 bone spikes. The remaining 2 bone spikes sealed the top and bottom directions. All 10 directions were sealed. At that moment, even if Su Zimo were to release Anaconda Sweeping Grass, it would be difficult for him to avoid the impact of the bone spikes. What a profound weapon control technique! Su Zimo was secretly shocked. Ethereal Sword of the 3 great secret skills of Misty Peak was also a weapon control technique and had a total of 3 levels. However, compared to Malevolent Earth Sect's weapon control technique, Ethereal Sword was clearly weaker. Up till this point of his cultivation, Su Zimo had fought countless battles. However, this was the first time he had encountered a cultivator who could seal off his movement technique with a weapon control technique. Now that he thought about it, it was truly a fluke that he was able to kill the Malevolent Earth Sect heir back then. With the existence of the ancient Spirit Lock formation, the Malevolent Earth Sect heir could not even unleash half of his combat strength. Everything else aside, if the Malevolent Earth Sect heir had revealed that weapon control technique back then, he would have been invincible. In a flash, Su Zimo did not have time to think as he swung Blood Quencher. His bloodline surged and he howled. Making use of the immense momentum, he slashed down heavily on an incoming bone spike. Clang! The bone spike was repelled and a gap was revealed. Di Xing was not far ahead. Su Zimo's eyes lit up. Just as he was about to charge through that gap, the air behind him, on his sides, above his head and below his feet rippled violently. The other 9 bone spikes descended, not giving Su Zimo any chance at all. Even though Di Xing was not far away, Su Zimo had no choice but to deal with the other 9 bone spikes. No matter how fast his movement technique was, he could not be faster than the bone spikes. Chapter 386. Clang! 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 Swinging Blood Quencher, Su Zimo repelled 3 bone spikes in succession. Immediately after, Su Zimo made use of his spirit perception to slip through the gap between 2 bone spikes. It was a close shave. With a whoosh, a pair of gigantic spirit wings unfurled behind him. Suddenly, Su Zimo soared into the air and finally dodged the remaining 4 bone spikes. Although the entire process seemed slow on the surface, it happened in the blink of an eye. A single moment of hesitation would have resulted in another hole in Su Zimo's body. Su Zimo could only barely defend against the attack of Di Xing's bone spear after unleashing his trump cards repeatedly. Even so, he was secretly shocked. Taking a deep breath of air, Su Zimo was about to dive over and shorten the distance between him and Di Xing when a cold glint appeared in his eyes and a malevolent aura surged over. The bone spike that he repelled initially had already arrived before him once more. The connection was perfect and did not give Su Zimo any chance to catch his breath. Making use of the power of his spirit wings, Su Zimo hovered in midair with his head tilted back and his entire body was almost parallel to the ground. Swoosh! 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 A series of sounds of air tearing could be heard. The 9 bone spikes from before returned and sealed off Su Zimo's path once more. Helpless, Su Zimo could only swing Blood Quencher and take it head-on while moving around. Clang! 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 Su Zimo had just soared into the air when he was forced to land on the ground again after a series of violent collisions from the bone spikes. At that moment, Su Zimo finally understood why Tang Yu and the others thought that he was no match for Pei Chunyu and Shuai. Even though he displayed unparalleled strength in the bloody battle on the Long Street and even killed 2 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators single-handedly, nobody thought highly of him. The 2 people before him had already given him the answer. That was the strength of disciples of the top factions and major sects of Tianhuang mainland. Heaven's Net Fist. Lu Yun's voice sounded. Behind Su Zimo, the spirit qi in the air fluctuated violently. This was a sign that a spirit art was about to condense. Just by sensing the changes in the spirit energy in the air, one could infer that the might of this Tianluo fist was extremely terrifying. Not far away, Lu Yun formed a hand seal and punched towards Su Zimo through the air. A fist condensed from spirit energy that was crystal clear as though it was corporeal burst forth and punched towards Su Zimo's landing spot. Boom! Su Zimo had just landed on the ground when he heard an explosion. Without looking, Su Zimo could feel a huge fist smashing towards his body. The momentum was terrifying, and it had already caused the surrounding air to explode. Lu Yun had arrived. After unleashing the heaven-gathering fist, Lu Yun's figure flickered as he charged forward. He swung his arm, causing the bracer on his arm to glow brightly as he ruthlessly smashed it towards Su Zimo's head. It was no wonder why Lu Yun was a disciple of an immortal sect, his timing was impeccable. At the same time as the heaven-gathering fist spirit technique descended, he also rushed forward and exploded with a killing move. Danger! The situation before him was even more dangerous than the bloody battle on the long street 10 days ago. Just dealing with the 10 bone spikes before him was already difficult enough. Now that Lu Yun was attacking from behind with terrifying melee combat strength, Su Zimo would die on the spot if he was careless. Lu Yun and Di Xing's eyes shone with excitement. To them, Su Zimo had nowhere to run and was dead for sure. Even if Pei Chunyu and Shui Yang were here, they might not be able to escape unscathed. However, to their surprise, there was no hint of panic on Su Zimo's face. His eyes were still as calm as water, with only a slight ripple of murderous aura. All of a sudden, Su Zimo did something that Lu Yun and Di Xing could not understand. He put away Blood Quencher. The two of them did not have time to think about why Su Zimo would do something like that, he had already attacked. Fiend Suppression Seal. Su Zimo's left hand moved and his middle and index fingers interlocked to form a hand seal as he channeled a mental cultivation technique. Boom! A gigantic golden palm descended from the skies, releasing a brilliant light that tore through the firmaments. The patterns on the palm could be seen clearly as it collided with the heaven-gathering fist with a terrifying aura. The fist and the palm collided, creating a deafening sound in the air. Instantly, the spirit chi in the void turned incomparably chaotic. A massive energy halo burst forth from the center of the collision. Spirit energy dissipated and a golden light spread in all directions. Just now, Su Zimo's arms were already numb from the consecutive head-on clashes with Di Xing. If not for the fact that his bloodline was strong and surged like a tsunami, he would not have been able to raise his arms right now, let alone have the strength to resist. Right then, Lu Yun threw a punch over. Good timing. Su Zimo narrowed his gaze and punched in reverse. His right hand was an indestructible blood-colored bone palm. On one hand, it was a charged attack while on the other, it was a forced counterattack. Knowing that he was not strong enough, Su Zimo could only ensure that his right hand would not be crippled by the other party's punch. Bang! The fist and arm collided. Lu Yun's arm guard struck Su Zimo's fist. However, there was no sound of bones cracking. Instead, there was a dull thud as though it was leather. Su Zimo's right hand was dripping with blood but his bones were intact and only his flesh was ruptured. His palm isn't crippled. Lu Yun's pupils constricted slightly. The other party had taken his supreme-grade spirit weapon head-on with his physical body and yet, the other party's flesh was merely ruptured without cracking his bones. Indeed, Su Zimo did not have enough strength in his hasty exchange of blows. Retreating, he collided with the 10 bone spikes that were coming from behind him. Fufu, this person died in my hands at the end of the day, Di Xing sneered. However, he stopped before he could finish his sentence. Right in front of the two of them, Su Zimo was about to be pierced by the 10 bone spikes when his tendons rang in unison. Suddenly, he shrunk into a ball, resembling a child of a few years old. Psst! The two sucked in a breath of cold air. Lu Yun's expression was even more shocked. How was that possible? Glass Palace was proficient in body tempering techniques and he knew very well that it was extremely difficult for someone to achieve what was happening. That was the manifestation of tendons transformation and bone shrinkage. One's tendons and bones had been cultivated to their limits. In fact, a person could even change their appearance with that. Only Jining Jinjuan who possessed an essence spirit would be able to distinguish the true appearance of that person. Not to mention him, even Pei Chunyu of Glass Palace could not do this. With his body shrinking, a few bone spikes that should have pierced Su Zimo missed instantly. Even so, Su Zimo could not avoid all the bone spikes. Su Zimo's skinny body twisted in midair, twisting into an unimaginable arc and passing through a few bone spikes. Poof! A flash of blood appeared. A bone spike brushed past Su Zimo's chest, leaving a wound. Although he could not avoid all the bone spikes, Su Zimo had already escaped from a sure-kill situation with his unparalleled tendons transformation and bone shrinkage. Crack! Crackle! Right in front of the two of them, Su Zimo's tendons and bones crackled once more. The body of a child a few years old expanded and returned to normal in the blink of an eye. Chapter 387. Di Xing's gaze was dark as he glared at the wound on Su Zimo's chest. Although the wound was not deep, the weapons of malevolent earth sect were all bathed in malevolent qi. Once they injured someone, even the smallest wound would cause malevolent qi to gush in furiously. If the malevolent qi entered the body, the best-case scenario would be that the circulation of spirit energy would not be smooth and one's combat strength would decrease. If the malevolent qi was not purged in time, one's foundation might even be destroyed and it would be difficult for one's cultivation to improve in the future. In serious cases, the malevolent qi would devour the heart and sever the meridians, one would die on the spot. However, under Di Xing's gaze, the wound on Su Zimo's chest shone with streaks of lightning and the malevolent qi dissipated completely. Standing on the spot, Su Zimo glared at Lu Yun and Di Xing with a cold gaze. The killing intent in his eyes intensified and his aura seemed to be changing as well. Hee. Di Xing snickered menacingly. Su Zimo, surrender yourself. Your tendons transformation technique might have worked the first time, but I'll be prepared the next time. Even if you shrink into a baby, you'll die. Su Zimo, I'll give you a chance. Lu Yun's gaze flickered as he suddenly said, as long as you're willing to hand over your body tempering cultivation technique, I can let you off. Furthermore, I'll choose to stand on your side and kill Di Xing. How about that? Fu. Su Zimo laughed and a demonic glint appeared in his eyes. Twisting his neck, he said, do you guys really think that you've won? The moment he said that, a sinister wind blew without warning. Looking at Su Zimo, who was not far away with a strange expression, Lu Yun and Di Xing suddenly felt their hearts skip a beat. Why do I have such a feeling? The two of them exchanged glances with grim expressions. You want my body tempering cultivation technique? Su Zimo licked his lips and his eyes shone with a ferocious glint. Grinning, he shouted, do you have the life to learn it? Boom! A muffled sound came from Su Zimo's body. It was as if some seal had been undone and an ancient demon had been released, causing one's heart to tremble. Although the two sides had only fought for a short time, Su Zimo had already realized that if they continued to fight, with his current strength, it would be very difficult to defeat the two of them. It just so happened that there was no one here. He could directly turn into his demon form and kill people without anyone noticing. Su Zimo unleashed the power of qi and blood, and his body expanded rapidly. Demonic qi swirled around his body, and his pupils were pitch black, faintly discernible within the crimson demonic qi. Demon race. Lu Yun and Di Xing's expressions changed drastically. No, how is that possible? Seeing the Denxiao Qi, the two of them immediately thought that Su Zimo was from the Yao clan, but on second thought, they were confused. Before demons formed their inner cores and formed their cores, they could not take on human form at all. How was this possible? Besides, Su Zimo had clearly opened the 8 extraordinary meridians unique to human beings. How could he be a demon? Everything before them could not be explained at all. In reality, even Jinying Jinjuan and void reversions might not be able to explain what they were seeing, let alone the two of them. Normally speaking, humans and demons were on different paths. The two races did not speak the same language and had different body structures. As such, their cultivation methods and cultivation techniques were naturally different. Even the tiger and leopard races, which were the closest to the demon race, had different cultivation techniques, let alone humans and demons. The cultivation techniques, bloodlines and everything else of the two races were not connected at all. However, if Su Zimo was a human, how could he explain the Yao Qi on his body? The density of the Yao Qi was not weaker than that of pure-blooded ferocious beasts. The moment Lu Yun and Di Xing were distracted, Su Zimo moved and arrived before Lu Yun almost instantly. A series of afterimages appeared behind Su Zimo, lingering for a long time without dispersing. Ah! Lu Yun's expression changed starkly and his heart nearly exploded. Su Zimo's aura was way too strong. Lunging over with a suffocating tragic aura, he was even more ferocious than the ferocious beasts of the ancient era. His blood qi surged and his killing intent was chilling. Without time to think, Lu Yun channeled his bloodline and channeled spirit energy furiously, causing his arm guard to shine with a resplendent spirit light. "I don't care what kind of monster you are, go and die." Lu Yun roared and channeled his strength to its limits. Green veins popped on his neck as he swung his arm and smashed it viciously towards Su Zimo's head. How was that an arm? With the augmentation of Glass Palace's secret skill, the arm was shrouded in a mysterious crystalline glow. Coupled with the augmentation of a supreme-grade spirit weapon, it was a steel whip as thick as an arm. Su Zimo did not dodge or retreat. His eyes lit up with a ferocious glint as he extended his arm to receive the blow. With a thud, Su Zimo's arm was flung out like the trunk of a divine elephant, looking soft and weak. The moment the two arms made contact, Su Zimo coiled and vibrated. The mysterious glow on Lu Yun's arm dissipated instantly. Crack! 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 Even with the protection of the arm guard, Lu Yun's arm was twisted beyond recognition. The bones within were all shattered and the stubble pierced through his flesh in a gory manner. Ah! Lu Yun shrieked tragically and his face turned pale instantly. After Su Zimo took on his demon form, his blood qi burst forth and his strength increased by more than a level. Furthermore, he was using a killing move from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Sho! 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 Su Zimo felt a gust of wind at the back of his head and a faint stinging pain could be felt. He did not need to look to guess that Di Xing must have attacked. Ha! Su Zimo sneered. After crippling Lu Yun's arm, he did not stop at all and closed in. Lu Yun grit his teeth and broke out in cold sweat. As long as he could stall Su Zimo for a moment, Di Xing's 10 bone spikes would descend and trap Su Zimo within, allowing him to escape. Lu Yun risked his life and punched out once more. After taking on his demon form, Su Zimo's strength was not the only thing that increased, his speed was as well. Instead of slowing down, Su Zimo's speed increased. Shrinking his body, he curled into a ball and knelt down on one knee. However, he managed to dodge Lu Yun's open fist. As though he was holding an immortal peach with both hands, Su Zimo arrived before Lu Yun. Suddenly, he bounced away and raised both palms, slamming down heavily on Lu Yun's chin. Snap! Lu Yun's head flew backward and his chin was smashed into pieces. His throat was snapped on the spot and he was no longer breathing. Di Xing sucked in a breath of cold air when he saw that. Who would have thought that a 7 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator of Glass Palace who was known for his strength in melee combat would be killed in a single round? A cold light tore through the air as the 10 bone spikes chased relentlessly. Initially, they should have pierced Su Zimo's body. However, Su Zimo lowered his body and was almost plastered to the ground. Darting forward, he lunged towards Di Xing like an anaconda plucking grass. With that, he avoided the attack of the 9 bone spikes. Poof! 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 Instead, the 9 bone spikes pierced Lu Yun's corpse. The remaining bone spike was about to strike Su Zimo's head when he reached out with his right hand and gripped it in his palm. It could not pierce through. The bone spike of a supreme-grade spirit weapon could not pierce through Su Zimo's right hand. In his moment of shock, Di Xing's vision darkened as a tall figure stood up from the ground, blocking his vision. It was too fast. He was within 10 feet of Di Xing instantly. Di Xing's heart sank. The next moment, a scarlet demonic chi surged and enveloped Di Xing. Chapter 388. A moment later, the scarlet demonic chi dissipated gradually, revealing two figures. Di Xing's eyes were widened with a horrified expression. There were 5 bloody holes on his head that were dripping with fresh blood. He was already dead. Su Zimo shuddered and his tendons and bones crackled. In the blink of an eye, his burly figure returned to normal. After changing into a clean set of green robes, Su Zimo picked up the storage bags on their waists. Taking out the map, he checked the direction and sped off. The Saber Mountain Spirit Sea was about 2 to 3 days' journey from Shantian City. Along the way, Su Zimo opened Lu Yu and Di Xing's storage bags and took a look. Initially, he thought that it would be best if he could find the weapon control technique of Malevolent Earth sect that allowed him to control 10 bone spikes. He could definitely cultivate that weapon control technique and use it on his flying sword. That way, even if he did not create a sword formation, he would be able to release an immense amount of killing power with that sword control technique alone. However, to his disappointment, he did not find any treasures in their storage bags that were worth his attention. However, on second thought, Su Zimo could understand. Malevolent Earth sect's weapon control technique was definitely a secret of their sect. How could they place it in their storage bags so casually? Take the 3 secret skills of Misty Peak for example. Even perfected being Jean Dan did not have the qualifications to carry them around, let alone Su Zimo and the others. Although he had killed the disciples of the 2 super sects, Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth sect, Su Zimo was still reflecting on his actions. Although he had fought countless battles ever since he started cultivating, he had rarely fought against disciples of super sections. The only time he did was deep underground. Su Zimo fought against 5 fiend heirs of the fiend sect single-handedly and even defeated them. That battle gave him the misconception that the fiend sects were nothing more than that. At that thought, there was naturally nothing to fear about the immortal and Buddhist sections. What's more, Su Zimo had never tasted defeat among those of the same level in the past few years, and he had even repeatedly killed those above his level. In Su Zimo's battle experience, even if his opponent's cultivation base was high, he could still use his movement techniques and speed to shorten the distance and kill him in close combat. However, this battle had completely awakened Su Zimo, causing him to put away his contempt. A truly powerful opponent would be able to restrict one's movements with the help of a brilliant artifact manipulation technique, leaving one with nowhere to hide and no chance to approach them. Di Xing's 10-bone spurs were extremely powerful and swift. His attacks were as smooth as flowing water without any pause. Su Zimo was too tired to deal with them, let alone fight them in close combat. This was precisely why Chi refinement cultivators were so terrifying and powerful. Most cultivators indeed had weak bodies. Once a demon beast got close to them, it was almost impossible for them to escape death. This was a fact. However, cultivators could make use of their spirit arts and weapons to restrict the movements of demon beasts. Both body refinement warriors and chi refinement warriors had their own strengths and weaknesses. Who was stronger would have to depend on which side had the advantage. In the battle just now, Su Zimo was merely channeling his bloodline and it was no longer enough to defend against the attacks of the 10-bone spurs. However, after he took on his demon form, his strength and speed were raised to a whole new level with his burst of blood chi, expanding the advantages of a body refinement warrior and allowing him to kill his opponent in close combat. Di Xing and Lu Yu alone were enough to cause Su Zimo so much trouble. If he were to face Pei Chunyu and Shuiyang, it would be even more difficult. As for Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth sect, they were only a part of the immortal and fiend sections. There were a total of 9 immortal sects, 7 demon sects, and 6 Buddhist sects. These ancient sects had a strong foundation and countless secret skills. What kind of fierce means would their successor disciples have? How terrifying would they be? Even though he knew that, Su Zimo's eyes did not reveal any hint of worry. Instead, they shone with excitement. On the surface, he had entered the ancient battlefield for the perfect meridian unlocking elixir. However, in reality, in the depths of his heart, he wanted to meet the disciples of those super sections. Su Zimo wanted to fight. He wanted to conquer the world. Deep in his bones, there was a pride that was not weaker than anyone else. Su Zimo relied on his rich aura and strong stamina to travel day and night without rest. Even at night, he did not have any reservations as he continued on his journey while emitting a rich demonic chi. There were very few demon beasts that dared to approach him. 2 days later, Su Zimo gradually slowed down as he gazed into the horizon with a deep look of shock. Su Zimo had never seen the legendary Saber Mountain Spirit Sea before. However, the moment he arrived, he already knew that the mountain and sea before him must be it. Before he even got close, Su Zimo could already hear the sound of tides rumbling and shuddering. A humid aura surged towards him. That aura was not humid air, but humid spirit chi that was rich and pure. Could it be that this vast and boundless ocean is actually all condensed from spiritual chi? The thought crossed Su Zimo's mind and he could not help but jump in fright. Right then, the sound of clothes fluttering could be heard from not far away. A few cultivators had just arrived and their conversation attracted Su Zimo's attention. The Saber Mountain Spirit Sea can be considered as a sacred ground for us saber cultivators. Even if we can't obtain the Saber Emperor's inheritance, we have to pay our respects here. Legend has it that in the ancient era, before the Saber Emperor left Tianhuang mainland, he did not wish for the legacy of the Saber Dao of weapons to be lost in Tianhuang mainland. Therefore, he used his unparalleled strength to plunder the spirit chi and stone mines within a radius of 5,000 kilometers to form an ocean and a mountain. That was how the immortal Saber Mountain Spirit Sea was created. That's incredible! Someone exclaimed. Su Zimo was shocked as well and was secretly shocked. What sort of methods were those that could form an ocean and stone mountains with a flip of their palms? It was comparable to carrying mountains and chasing the moon, burning the heavens and boiling the seas. The most frightening thing was that this spirit sea was formed in the ancient era and countless years had passed since then. Even the major sects of the ancient era had been destroyed without a trace after such a long time. However, this ruin was still perfectly preserved without any signs of drying up. If that legend was true, the Saber Emperor might have already surpassed the level of cultivators. There was a saying in the cultivation world that at the end of the path of cultivation was the legendary ethereal immortals that lived forever. However, nobody could give a definite answer as to whether or not there were immortals. However, in Su Zimo's opinion, even the methods of immortals in the legends would not be anything special. When he got closer, the impact of the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea on Su Zimo was even more intense. There were countless black reefs on the shore. For some reason, the reefs were filled with marks left behind by sharp weapons that were a frightening sight. The tides roared and howled with a majestic aura as they slammed against the shore, creating layers of snow-like waves. Between the horizon and the sea stood a towering mountain peak that pierced through the clouds. The shape of the mountain peak resembled a saber that was stabbed into the spirit sea. The saber was slender and steep and its handle was faintly discernible in the clouds. That was the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea. Chapter 389. The sword reigned supreme in Tianhuang mainland and there were extremely few pure saber cultivators, let alone in the ancient battlefield. Even though the ruin before them was left behind by the Saber Emperor, there were not many cultivators gathered here. Looking along the coastline, there were only a few thousand people. The strange thing was that most of the cultivators stood slightly further away from the coastline, as though they were afraid of the spirit sea as they discussed and pointed in hushed tones. Su Zimo had limited knowledge of the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea and came near the crowd to listen carefully. The Saber Emperor's methods are heaven-defying and he can gather chi into a sea. If one can cultivate in the Spirit Sea, they'll definitely benefit greatly, a skinny cultivator in the crowd said with a flickering gaze. Foo-foo. How ignorant. The moment that person said that, a series of mockery and ridicule sounded from the crowd. The person who spoke first blushed and stretched his neck, retorting, "What did I say wrong?" The spirit chi in the spirit sea is indeed rich and pure. However, it is filled with endless saber chi that is sharp and sharp. If you enter the spirit sea, you'll have to endure the baptism of the saber chi. Look at your puny body. You'll explode and die the moment you step into the spirit sea. Hee, countless paragons have been buried in the spirit sea throughout history. If you're not afraid of death, you can give it a try. A look of realization flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. It was no wonder why there were marks left behind by sharp weapons on the reefs by the shore. It turned out that there was endless saber chi in the spirit sea and cultivators with weak physiques could not withstand it at all. If one was too close to the shore and the seawater surged, a huge wave would sweep them in and they would never be able to get out again. A cultivator said in a deep voice, "This is the test left behind by the Saber Emperor. If you want to obtain the inheritance, you'll have to cross the spirit sea before you and ascend the Saber Mountain." Su Zimo looked into the distance. The Saber Mountain stood at the end of the spirit sea, truly far away and unreachable. Isn't that simple? The skinny cultivator pointed at the Saber Mountain and hollered heroically, "Let's soar on our swords. Although the Saber Mountain is far away, we can travel day and night. What's there to be afraid of?" Ha ha ha. The crowd burst into laughter again. Someone shook his head. If the test left behind by the Saber Emperor was that simple, would there have only been a single person from the ancient era who managed to pass it and obtain the inheritance? Before he finished speaking, a cultivator rushed over from afar with an excited expression. He took out a spirit saber from his storage bag and leaped onto it. Channeling his spirit energy, he shouted, "Go!" Whoosh! That person turned into a stream of light and crossed the spirit sea, heading towards the Saber Mountain. Most of the cultivators in the crowd had mocking expressions on their faces. They sneered as if they were waiting to see a joke. Su Zimo knew that things weren't that simple. Before he could finish his thought, the cultivator, who had just arrived above the spirit sea, suddenly stopped. He paused for a moment and then began to fall. No matter how this person struggled in the air and circulated his spiritual energy, it was of no use. Before it fell into the spirit sea, it was swallowed by a wave. Ah! Ah! This person floated in the spirit sea, occasionally letting out a scream. After a while, he disappeared. The surface of the spirit sea was stained with a hint of blood that gradually faded as the waves surged. When he saw that, the skinny cultivator who initially declared that he wanted to cross the spirit sea turned pale. Sweat broke out on his forehead and even his breathing became heavier. Su Zimo was secretly shocked as well. This spirit sea was truly deadly. It was no wonder why nobody dared to attempt to cross the spirit sea even though there were thousands of cultivators here. A cultivator at the side explained, "Flying is prohibited above the spirit sea. Even if you cross it, you'll fall into the spirit sea. You're only asking for trouble if you try to play tricks in front of an emperor," another person sneered. The skinny cultivator calmed himself down and asked after a moment, "In that case, only body-tempering super sects such as Glass Palace and Overlord Palace can cross the spirit sea?" "It has nothing to do with your sect," another cultivator explained, "only saber cultivators are qualified to cross the spirit sea. If other cultivators try to cross by force, they'll be minced by the saber chi." "That's right. I heard that there was once a paragon of sword sect who tried to cross the spirit sea to challenge the might of the Saber Emperor. However, he was sliced by the saber chi before he could even make it 100 meters and died in the spirit sea." At that point, Su Zimo already had a rough understanding of the Saber Mountain spirit sea. Firstly, one could not cross it by flying. Secondly, one had to be a saber cultivator. Thirdly, one had to have a strong physique to withstand the baptism of the saber chi and cross the spirit sea to pass the test left behind by the Saber Emperor. If that was the case, there was a chance for him to give it a try. Right then, Su Zimo's gaze shifted and landed on a black reef by the shore. A man in blood-colored robes sat on it with a saber placed horizontally on his knees. His eyes were closed and his wet black hair draped down casually, covering his face. Out of the thousands of cultivators, this was the only one who dared to sit on the reef by the shore and allow the seawater to wash over him. His clothes were already drenched, but he did not seem to realize it. There were more than 10 corpses behind him, and it was clear that some of them had died not long ago. Looking at the back view of that person, Zimo felt as though he had seen him somewhere before, but he could not recall where. After pondering for a moment, Zimo looked at a cultivator beside him and asked softly, "Who's that blood-robed cultivator at the front?" "He's a ruthless character." The cultivator beside him whispered with some wariness, "Do you see the corpses behind him? They're all cultivators who wanted to cross the Spirit Sea. Because they set off too close to him, they were all killed by him. Just because of that?" Zimo frowned slightly. If that was the only reason why he went on a killing spree, that person was not as simple as a ruthless character. The cultivator pouted his lips. "The fiend heir of Shura sect doesn't need a reason to kill. It's him." Zimo's heart skipped a beat. The cultivator beside him continued, "The fiend heir of Shura sect has a high chance of crossing the Spirit Sea and obtaining the inheritance. I heard that the cultivator who obtained the inheritance of the Saber Emperor 1,000 years ago was from Shura sect." All of a sudden, the blood-robed cultivator who was initially seated on the reef opened his eyes and stood up. Turning around slowly, he looked in Zimo's direction. For a top expert like him, he would definitely sense it if he was stared at for too long. Furthermore, in that instant, Zimo's heart skipped a beat and there was even a hint of hostility in his eyes. When he saw this person's face, Zimo no longer had any doubts. The blood-robed cultivator was none other than the fiend heir of Shura sect who fought Zimo underground previously. Fufufu, the blood-robed cultivator laughed and glared at Zimo. His eyes shone brightly with excitement as he said slowly, "You're here indeed. I've been waiting for a long time." Chapter 390. The moment he said that, the saber that hovered in front of the blood-robed cultivator buzzed and emitted an extremely rich killing intent that caused one's heart to shudder. The group of cultivators who were initially standing beside Zimo were shocked and dispersed. The blood-robed cultivator's name was Baiyu. "Back then, the few of us were lucky enough to escape. We thought that you were already buried underground." Baiyu's gaze was fervent as he stuck out his scarlet tongue, revealing a row of pearly white teeth. Smiling sinisterly, he said, "However, when I heard that Demonis G was still alive, I guessed that you were definitely still alive." Zimo was motionless and asked with a calm expression, "You knew that I was coming?" "Huh." Baiyu said smugly, "Given your capabilities, you'll definitely enter the ancient battlefield. Since you're a saber cultivator, you'll definitely make a trip to the Saber Mountain Spirit Sea." Within the fiend sects, the fight for the position of the fiend heir was extremely intense. Almost every single fiend heir had to trample over countless corpses to get to their current position, none of them were ordinary. It was especially so for Shura sect. For a sect that attained its Tao through killing, the competition between fellow sect members was even crueler. As the fiend heir of Shura sect, there was no way he could take it lying down after being defeated by an unknown cultivator deep underground. It seems like the two of them have a deep feud. What sect is that person from? To think that he can incur a feud with the fiend heir of Shura sect and still be alive and well? Far away, many cultivators were gathered and discussing. Baiyu's gaze circled Zimo's waist but did not catch sight of his sect badge. He could not help but sneer coldly and say coldly, "I don't care where you're from. Today, I'm going to take your life to build my Tao foundation." "I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed," Zimo replied indifferently, "If I can defeat you once, I can do it again." The moment he said that, the crowd was in an uproar. That person defeated the fiend heir of Shura sect? What's the background of that person? Needless to say, he must be a paragon of the 9 immortal sects. Clang clang clang. Without a second word, Zimo withdrew Blood Quencher from his storage bag. Circulating his spirit energy, the saber shone brightly like a blood sun and trembled endlessly. 5 perfect lines, blood chi soaring to the heavens. The blood stench emitted by Blood Quencher was extremely similar to Baiyu's aura. Good blade, good blade. Bayu's eyes lit up and he said with a big laugh, "This saber is simply tailor-made for me." "You think you're worthy?" Su Zimo said calmly. Blood Quencher was refined by him personally. Just as it was about to fail, it was fused with his bloodline, allowing him to succeed and condense the fifth spirit pattern. Su Zimo's bloodline cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, the Void Thunder Manual, and even contained the essence of dragons. In this world, other than himself, who else was qualified? Su Zimo executed Divine Steed Fleeting and closed in on Bayu. He executed the stance of Plow Heaven Stride and stepped on the reef in front of Bayu to stop himself. Rumble. The reef exploded. Blood Quencher descended from the skies with a blood beam that shrouded Bayu instantly. "Ah, he's at 5 Meridian Foundation establishment." How dare a 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator challenge the fiend heir of Shura sect? How did he make it here alive with such a low cultivation realm? A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd once more. Clang! Bayu did not dodge or retreat. Raising his supreme-grade saber with both arms, he swung it upwards and took the attack head-on. The deafening sound of metal clashing drowned out everyone's exclamations and also explained their doubts just now. 7 spirit meridians shone beneath Bayu's blood robes. Spirit energy surged and emitted a thick blood stench. His killing intent was almost corporeal. However, Bayu did not gain any advantage against Su Zimo's attack. What frightening melee combat strength! That person's bloodline. I seem to have heard the sound of a tsunami. You must have heard wrongly. That's the sound of the spirit sea. Tsunami blood, how can anyone cultivate their bloodline to that realm? A cold killing intent flashed through Bayu's eyes. Bayu loosened his grip and the saber in his hands left his grip. It circled around Blood Quencher and sliced towards Su Zimo's face. That slash was extremely strange and had exceeded Su Zimo's expectations and knowledge. Su Zimo was alarmed and retreated hurriedly. Shing! Even though Su Zimo had dodged in time, there was still a cut on his green robes in front of his chest. There was a chill in his chest and there was a faint stinging pain. Bayu scoffed coldly and had no intention of fighting Su Zimo head-on. He strode forward and grabbed his saber once more. In a flash, he stabbed towards Su Zimo's ribs and flicked the tip of his saber upwards. Su Zimo frowned. Bayu's saber technique was extremely lethal. However, the angle of his attack was way too tricky and was extremely uncomfortable for him. Su Zimo retreated once more. In the past, Su Zimo could kill his opponents with simple slashes using his terrifying bloodline and the perfect-grade spirit weapon, Blood Quencher. However, after fighting against the disciples of the super sects of Tianhuang mainland for the past few days, Su Zimo realized his weakness. He did not know anything about saber techniques and was filled with openings. The moment he attacked, his opponents would grasp onto his openings and deal a fatal blow. Bayu did not fight head-on and merely relied on his brilliant saber technique to force Su Zimo to retreat step by step. Su Zimo did not dare to attack at all. It was wrong to attack. The openings would only increase and the situation would become more dangerous. Bayu's saber attacks became denser and relentless. Every single slash was a killing move with a chilling killing intent and a torrential blood stench. Any moment of carelessness and Su Zimo would die on the spot. Thankfully, Su Zimo had the help of his spirit perception and was able to avert danger time and time again. Back then, in the depths of the underground, Su Zimo fought 1 against 5 and even killed a fiend heir. But now, without the ancient spirit lock formation, the fiend heir of Shura sect was able to unleash his full strength and suppress Su Zimo completely with his intricate saber technique. Even so, Su Zimo's eyes did not show any signs of panic. It was easy for him to get out of this situation. Demon transformation and release his blood chi was one option. At that time, Su Zimo's strength and speed would rise to a whole new level. No matter what intricate saber technique the other party had, he would fight in melee combat and take on everything with brute strength. However, there were too many people here. If he were to demon transform, he would not have a place to stay in the ancient battlefield or Tianhuang mainland in the future. The second option was to cross the Spirit Sea. With that thought, Su Zimo already had a plan in mind. With a long howl, he retreated and sprinted towards the Spirit Sea. What? That person wants to cross the Spirit Sea? Isn't he courting death? Bai Yu was in the mood to kill, and there was no way he would let Su Zimo off as he hollered, "Where do you think you're going?" The two of them arrived above the Spirit Sea one after another. Su Zimo took a deep breath and stepped on the waves with a light movement. Sprinting towards the Saber Mountain, he was already 5 kilometers away in the blink of an eye. Bai Yu held his saber in his mouth and crouched like a water dragon floating on the surface of the sea. His limbs moved and his speed was not slower than Su Zimo's. Chapter 391. In the eyes of the masses, the Spirit Sea was definitely not a land of fortune. Countless paragons and heroes had been devoured by the Spirit Sea. Up till now, there were very few cultivators who dared to attempt it. Su Zimo and Bai Yu charged into the Spirit Sea one after another, causing a series of exclamations. Initially, the surface of the sea was merely turbulent. However, the moment the two of them charged in, the Spirit Sea seemed to have been triggered by something and started rumbling. Thousands of gigantic waves rose from the surface of the sea. They were 100,000 feet tall and had a majestic aura, blanketing the skies. Su Zimo and Bai Yu paused in their tracks at the same time, and their expressions changed starkly when they saw the gigantic waves that covered the skies. This was the might of heaven and earth, and there was no way humans could fight against it. In the face of the raging waves, Su Zimo and Bai Yu seemed extremely insignificant. Rumble. Boom. The gigantic waves crashed and slammed the two of them into the depths of the sea. Even if perfected being Jin Dan was here, he would not be able to defend against this power. Before entering the sea, Su Zimo hurriedly took a deep breath and held his breath. In the blink of an eye, the two of them were devoured by the Spirit Sea. It was only after truly entering the Spirit Sea that Su Zimo experienced what cultivators just now referred to as saber chi. Every single drop of seawater contained a sharp intent that sliced Su Zimo's body from all directions like blades. Even with his strong physique, he could vaguely feel waves of pain. Su Zimo was secretly shocked. If it was any other ordinary cultivator that was devoured by the Spirit Sea, they would most likely be torn into pieces in less than 10 breaths. All of a sudden, a sense of danger flashed through Su Zimo's mind as an extremely unusual ripple appeared in the water behind him, as though something sharp was piercing through the waves and piercing over. It's Bai Yu. Even after entering the Spirit Sea, Bai Yu did not give up on chasing after Su Zimo. Su Zimo exerted strength through his entire body and leaped out of the sea like a swimming dragon. He stepped on the water and continued sprinting towards the Saber Mountain. Bai Yu followed closely behind. In front of them, the sound of the waves was getting louder and louder. Between the sea and the sky, there was a white line surging with waves. It was as if thousands of soldiers and horses were riding on the waves. The momentum was terrifying. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo and his companion were once again engulfed by the surging waves. He leaped up again and again, only to be smashed down again and again by the waves. Under the baptism of the endless saber chi, even Su Zimo felt the pressure. The deeper they went into the spiritual sea, the more terrifying the power of the raging waves became. The deep sea continued to roar as raging waves surged. It was as if it would not stop until Su Zimo and Su Xiaolan were submerged and swallowed. Their speed became slower and slower. The distance between the two of them grew further and further. In terms of physical strength, Bai Yu was no match for Su Zimo. At this time, White Feather already felt somewhat exhausted and dizzy. The longer he stayed in the Spirit Sea, the more saber chi would invade his body. When one's body reached its limit, their entire body would be torn into pieces by the endless saber energy. Their flesh, blood, bones, and internal organs would all be cut apart by the saber energy. Bai Yu could already sense that the saber energy in the Spirit Sea had already invaded his organs. He leaped and arrived at the surface of the sea. Taking a deep breath, a faint salty stench came from the depths of his throat. I can't continue chasing. Bayu's heart skipped a beat. He still had a chance if he returned to the shore now. By the time he entered the depths of the Spirit Sea, it would be too late even if he wanted to return. Looking at Su Zimo, who was still floating in the Spirit Sea, Bayu's eyes shone with a venomous hatred. He was still indignant that he could not kill Su Zimo personally. However, in his opinion, Su Zimo would definitely die if he continued forward. That was because the waves in the deep sea were even more turbulent and the saber chi was even sharper. At that thought, Bayu sneered and sped towards the shore. As for Su Zimo, he was already further away from the shore. Su Zimo ignored Bayu's movements. Given Bayu's physique, there was no way he could catch up to Su Zimo in the Spirit Sea. Su Zimo's attention was entirely focused on how to defend against the incoming tides and pass the test to reach the Saber Mountain. After arriving at the shore, Bayu assumed a lotus position hurriedly with a pale expression and channeled his bloodline cultivation technique to expel the saber chi in his body. A long time later. On the shore, thousands of cultivators looked at the tiny figure in the Spirit Sea. Everyone's mouths were agape and their faces were filled with shock. 4 hours had already passed and that person was still advancing in the Spirit Sea with great difficulty. This was an outcome that had already exceeded everyone's expectations. Before everyone, although Su Zimo was tiny right now, he was not inferior. Such an unyielding willpower moved everyone. Wasn't the same the path of cultivation? Without such willpower and perseverance, how could one reach the end of the path? Could he truly pass the Saber Emperor's inheritance? That can't be right. In history, only a single person has succeeded. It's impossible for him. By the looks of it, he can't hold on any longer. Many cultivators discussed in hushed tones. Suddenly, Bayu opened his eyes and heaved out a long breath of air. His face was flushed once more. After 4 hours of cultivation, the saber chi in his body was finally purged. During this period of time, Su Zimo was still advancing in the tide, wrestling against the raging waves and enduring the torture of the saber chi. I refuse to believe that you can reach the Saber Mountain. Bayu's gaze was cold as he looked into the distance and grit his teeth. Right then, another raging wave rose from the surface of the sea and smashed heavily against that figure. The figure shuddered and fell into the sea once more. Many cultivators were already numb to this scene and were extremely familiar with it. Before long, that figure would leap out of the sea once more. 15 minutes passed and nothing happened. An hour passed and it was still the same. That person seemed to have vanished. The smile in Bayu's eyes intensified. However, after 2 hours, everyone was finally certain that the scholarly green-robed cultivator had already died in the Spirit Sea. Sigh, it's a pity. If that person's cultivation realm was higher, he might have been able to pass the test. That's right. He's only at 5 Meridian Foundation establishment and has immense potential. His future is limitless. 2 cultivators said regretfully. When he heard those words, Bayu's expression turned cold as killing intent surged in his heart. In a flash, he arrived before the 2 of them and slashed twice in reverse without a word. Poof! Poof! Blood flashed. The 2 slashes were extremely fast and coupled with the fact that the 2 cultivators were unprepared, their throats were sliced by Bayu's slashes. Blood spurted out and they died on the shore with widened eyes. The Shura sect established their Tao through killing. They killed whenever they wanted to without asking for a reason or explanation. The expressions of the remaining cultivators changed drastically. They quickly spread out and distanced themselves from Bayu, hiding far away. After killing 2 people in a row, Bayu's expression was calm as usual, as though he had done something extremely normal. He sat back down on a reef and continued cultivating with his eyes closed. Nobody knew. At the depths of the Spirit Sea, a figure was stepping on the sand at the bottom of the sea. Wielding a blood-colored saber in his left hand, he continued advancing step by step. Even though he was covered in injuries, he did not retreat. The bottom of the sea was dark and cold. However, that pair of eyes shone with a deep glint, firm as a mountain and unwavering. Chapter 392. Sprinting on the surface of the sea was getting increasingly difficult. The power of the raging tides was way too strong. Under the relentless impact, Su Zimo's body was almost torn apart and even his organs were shaken violently. He would definitely die if this continued. Su Zimo had no choice but to take a deep breath and dive into the depths of the sea. The bottom of the sea was filled with white bones. These were paragons that had been buried in the spirit sea for countless years. Stepping on their corpses, Su Zimo advanced slowly. Compared to the surface of the sea, the bottom of the sea was much calmer. There were no raging tides or raging tides. However, there were undercurrents at the bottom of the sea. In the deep sea, Su Zimo had to endure an even greater pressure. Despite the endless saber chi, he still had to swim against the currents. There were countless times when he was knocked down by the undercurrents. However, he stood up time and time again to continue advancing. As time passed by, the saber chi in Su Zimo's body had already reached his limits. Wounds appeared on his flesh, meridians, tendons, bones and organs one after another. The sharp saber chi crisscrossed and was unusually sharp. Su Zimo's skin had already split open and blood oozed out. Spiderweb-like cracks covered Su Zimo's body in a terrifying manner. Su Zimo grunted dully and shuddered to a stop in his tracks. If this continued, the life force in his body would be destroyed by the saber chi. Su Zimo sat on the ground and released the power of blood chi. At the bottom of the sea, Su Zimo was not worried about his demonic cultivation being exposed. Su Zimo's body began to rumble with the sounds of tides, thunder, tigers and leopards. In fact, there was even a strange sound that seemed familiar and extremely terrifying. A dragon's roar. A thought flashed through Su Zimo's mind. The fourth sound was the dragon's roar that he had heard in the primordial ruin. It possessed a boundless, majestic, dignified aura that came from the primordial era. After swallowing that half of the dragon egg, Su Zimo's body was ultimately imprinted with an unerasable mark. At the same time, Su Zimo channeled the mental cultivation technique of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. If he wanted to survive, he would have to suppress the saber chi in his body. From the initial body tempering chapter, to the tendons transformation chapter, to the bones forging chapter, to the marrow cleansing chapter, to the organs refining chapter, to the final orifice clearing chapter. Su Zimo silently recited the 6 scriptures in his heart, circulating the 6 types of heart sutras in a continuous cycle. Behind Su Zimo, a wild ox demon monarch appeared. It plowed through the sky with its horns as sharp as spears. It raised its head and stabbed furiously as if it wanted to pierce through the firmament. After a slight pause, another phantom appeared. It was a tall and sturdy bear demon. It suddenly stood up straight and roared at the sky. Then, a giant python coiled up, its eyes cold. A tall and sturdy ape widened its blood-red eyes and roared in an unruly manner. It beat its chest and stomped its feet, letting out muffled thuds, as if a god was beating a drum. A divine steed with bone spurs on its back galloped over. Wherever its hooves landed, cracks appeared in the void. It was a ghastly sight. Immediately after, the phantoms of a white tiger and spirit leopard appeared, baring their fangs and claws as they lunged over. Billions of bolts of lightning coiled around Su Zimo's body in a bedazzling manner. In the sea of lightning, many phantoms of demon kings appeared and roared into the skies, releasing endless might to fight against the saber chi in Su Zimo's body. Initially, the surface of the sea had already regained its calm. However, right in front of everyone, the seawater suddenly boiled without any warning, creating raging waves. It was as though an ancient and terrifying existence was awakening deep in the depths of the sea. Could that person not be dead? That's impossible, right? Many cultivators were bewildered. A hint of doubt flashed through Bai Yu's eyes as well. In the depths of the sea. saber chi streaked and left wounds on Su Zimo's body both internally and externally. His blood boiled, and as soon as a trace of blood appeared on his wounds, they healed. Destruction, repair, destruction, repair. It was a cycle. The intense pain stimulated Su Zimo's nerves. However, the glint in his eyes turned brighter. With that cycle, Su Zimo's flesh, tendons, bones, meridians and organs transformed once more. Of the 7 orifices, his mouth orifice would be unlocked soon as well. Regardless of whether he could obtain the Saber Emperor's inheritance or not, this trip would be worth it. Without that pressure, he wouldn't be able to unlock his mouth orifice within a month. A long time later, Su Zimo shuddered and suddenly opened his mouth, roaring. Opening his mouth at the bottom of the sea would cause seawater to gush in instantly given the terrifying pressure, that was equivalent to courting death. However, with Su Zimo's roar, the phantoms of the demon kings behind him roared at the same time. A huge sound wave was suddenly released, causing countless ripples, which actually forced the seawater around him to retreat. His mouth orifice was unlocked. At this point of his cultivation, only his eye's orifice was unlocked among his 7 orifices. After the roar, the seawater drowned Su Zimo in an even more turbulent manner, colliding repeatedly. As though provoked, the saber chi turned even more ferocious. Crack! 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 The phantoms of the demon kings dissipated. The next moment, an even more terrifying aura appeared. Behind Su Zimo, a blood-colored butterfly appeared. It was illusory and hazy with 2 ethereal crescent moons imprinted on its wings. Instantly, the seawater calmed down, as though it was frozen by some sort of aura. The blood-colored butterfly flapped its wings gently and the saber chi within Su Zimo's body calmed down instantly, completely suppressed. The blood-colored butterfly vanished once more, as though it had never appeared in the first place. When the saber chi was no longer offensive, the only thing left in Su Zimo's body was the purest spirit energy. It was as vast as the sea. The spirit energy within Su Zimo's dantian was growing rapidly. Initially, he had just advanced to 5 Meridian Foundation establishment. However, right now, his 5th spirit meridian was filled with pure and rich spirit energy. As the spirit energy surged, a 6th spirit meridian appeared vaguely. After an unknown period of time, there was a boom. Under the cover of his green robes, the 6th spirit meridian was unlocked. 6 Meridian Foundation establishment. Su Zimo was delighted. He had made breakthroughs in both his demonic and immortal cultivation. Although he was at the bottom of the sea right now, the pressure he felt was greatly reduced. Su Zimo continued advancing against the current. Before long, his spirit sea changed once more. It was as though a pair of invisible hands had reached into his spirit sea and stirred it forcefully, forming a gigantic vortex that moved the entire spirit sea. Su Zimo's body was sucked in and he felt the world spin. His entire body was distorted by a spiraling force and was almost about to explode. His tendons and bones sounded at the same time and his organs shifted. Su Zimo released his blood chi hurriedly to suppress his injuries and circulated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Of the 7 orifices on his head, 5 shone with a demonic glow and only his eyes were dull. If he was sucked into the vortex just now without breaking through, even Su Zimo's body would have been torn to shreds. The changes in the spirit sea attracted countless gazes once more. The spirit sea vortex was way too terrifying and resembled a divine miracle. It was like a bottomless pit that wanted to devour everything in the firmaments. How could this be? I heard Master mention before that a similar phenomenon appeared 1,000 years ago when the cultivator who obtained the Saber Emperor's inheritance entered the spirit sea. You mean to say, hurry, look. There seems to be someone in the vortex. On the reef, Bayu's expression turned extremely terrible. Chapter 393. Initially, Su Zimo was already feeling pressure from the countercurrent at the bottom of the sea. It was also under that pressure that he was able to unlock one of his 7 orifices, the mouth orifice. After being sucked into the spirit sea vortex, Su Zimo felt an even greater pressure. Left with no choice, he could only circulate the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness furiously to fight against it. His flesh and blood were plentiful, his tendons and bones were trembling. His marrow was cleansed, his organs were refined and his 7 orifices were unlocked. Under the stimulation of the spirit sea vortex, endless demonic chi surged towards his head and finally, his eyes orifices again and again. After an unknown period of time, Su Zimo, who was in the spirit sea vortex uncontrollably, suddenly opened his eyes. 2 divine lights burst forth and illuminated the entire dark bottom of the sea. His 7 orifices were all unlocked. His skin, flesh, tendons, marrow, organs and 7 orifices were connected and a major heavenly cycle was formed in his body. Lesser mastery of the orifice clearing section. Although the spirit sea vortex was still there, Su Zimo's body was rooted to the spot. No matter how the seawater washed, spun and twisted, he did not budge at all. His 7 orifices were unlocked and the dizziness disappeared. In his agitation, Su Zimo could not help but roar into the skies. His roar was so loud that it could shatter metal and even drown out the rumbling of the spirit sea. When the cultivators who were initially watching from the shore heard that roar, their bodies shuddered and their expressions changed, all their doubts were gone. That person is indeed still alive. Is he going to become the second person to obtain the Saber Emperor's inheritance? The fiend heir of Shura sect, Baiyu, stood on the reef silently with a dark expression. Look! Right then, someone pointed to the depths of the spirit sea and exclaimed. Everyone looked over and saw that the spirit sea vortex that resembled a bottomless pit was slowly moving towards the Saber Mountain, as though it was being pushed by some sort of force. What's going on? Everyone was confused and did not know what was going on. At that moment, if any cultivator could fly above the spirit sea and look down, they would definitely see a shocking scene. At the center of the spirit sea vortex, a green-robed cultivator was strolling leisurely at the bottom of the sea with his hands behind his back. His gaze was clear and deep while demonic chi lingered around his body. With every step he took, the whirlpool in his spirit sea would move forward a little bit. The entire spirit sea was affected by him. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, a day and a night had passed. The huge spirit sea whirlpool had already arrived at the foot of Blade Mountain. Under countless gazes, a black dot-like figure walked out of the spirit sea and rushed towards the peak of the mountain. He passed. After 1,000 years, another cultivator had passed the test left behind by the Saber Emperor and was about to receive the Saber Emperor's inheritance. On the shore, many cultivators were dumbfounded, and at the same time, a trace of jealousy flashed across their eyes. Baiyu narrowed his eyes and his gaze flickered. No one knew that at this moment, the shock he received was even greater. This was because he had heard that 1,000 years ago, the senior of the Shura sect who had obtained the inheritance of the Blade Emperor was already exhausted after passing through this spirit sea. After resting for 7 days, he finally recovered his strength and climbed to the top of the mountain. And now, the person in front of him, after crossing the spirit sea, still had the energy to rush to the top of the mountain. That person must die. Baiyu closed his eyes and muttered internally. He knew more about the Saber Emperor's inheritance than other cultivators. Legend has it that the Saber Emperor left behind 2 secret skills at the peak of the mountain. One of them was a mental cultivation secret skill that had already been obtained by the senior of the Shura sect. The other was said to be the 5 stances of the Saber technique. In other words, the inheritance that Su Zimo was about to obtain was the 5 stances of the Saber technique. The more profound a Saber technique was, the harder it was to grasp it. Furthermore, there were different levels and realms of Saber techniques. Baiyu believed that even if Su Zimo could learn the 5 stances within a short period of time, he would definitely not be able to grasp the essence of the Saber technique. That person's cultivation realm is still low and he's not familiar with his Saber technique yet. This is the best chance to kill him. Baiyu took a deep breath of air and assumed a lotus position. He intended to wait for Su Zimo to return from the shore and kill the latter. Peak of the mountain. It was empty and desolate with only a stone stele. A lifelike painting was etched on the stone steel. It was a boorish and robust man. His clothes were open, and he was unrestrained and unrestrained. He sat alone at the seaside with a long saber placed horizontally on his lap, and he held a jar of wine in his left hand as he looked towards the distant surface of the sea with an aged gaze, and the space between his brows carried a wisp of faint worry. Although he had never seen the Saber Emperor in person, Su Zimo knew that the burly man was the Saber Emperor the moment he caught sight of the painting. Su Zimo walked forward and placed his palm on the stone steel, stroking it gently. Through the rough surface of the stone steel, it was as though he could sense the aura of time. Suddenly, Su Zimo's body shuddered and he froze on the spot. A thought entered Su Zimo's mind. After 1,000 years, someone has finally arrived at this place. Sigh. That sigh was filled with gratification and emotions, but more than that, it was as though a burden had been lifted. In the ancient war, the great Tao of weapons withered and only the Tao of the sword reigned. I was about to cross the South Seas and could not bear to see the saber Tao of Tianhuang end. Therefore, I left behind a legacy of 2 scrolls for a fated person. Su Zimo knew that this was merely a remnant thought left behind by the Saber Emperor. The first scroll, title Manual, is a mental cultivation secret skill that has been passed down to someone 1,000 years ago. The second scroll, Sea Calming Manual, contains 5 saber stances and is imparted to you today. Suddenly, the voice disappeared and an image appeared before Su Zimo's eyes. A burly man stood on a saber mountain, wielding a saber casually as he leaped into the spirit sea. His eyes lit up and the vicissitudes of life in them disappeared, revealing a sharp glint as he went against the current and slashed forward. Splash! The seawater split to the sides, creating a blank area. Saber drawing water severing. At the same time, the Saber Emperor's voice sounded. First stance of the Sea Calming Manual, Countercurrent. After the countercurrent stance, the Saber Emperor waved his saber and spun it around his body. The seawater rolled up 1,000 layers of huge waves and surged in all directions. Second stance of the Sea Calming Manual, Raging Waves. Immediately after, the Saber Emperor retracted his saber and slashed forward once more. The angle of this slash was somewhat unique as it twisted and spun, as though it was slashing at empty space. The moment the slash landed, the entire spirit sea seemed to be pulled by something and spun, forming a gigantic vortex. Third stance of the Sea Calming Manual, Vortex. At that point, Su Zimo was enlightened. He had experienced those saber stances personally when he was crossing the spirit sea. Crossing the spirit sea was not only a test, it was also a legacy. Fourth stance of the Sea Calming Manual, Ripple. Fifth stance of the Sea Calming Manual, Sea Calming. In the blink of an eye, he was done with the demonstration of the 5 stances. The Saber Emperor's voice continued, although there are only 5 stances in the Sea Calming Manual, I've infused everything I've learned in my life into the Tao of saber techniques that simplify and return to simplicity. If you can comprehend the first 4 stances, it'll be enough for you to roam the cultivation world. If you can comprehend the final stance, you can roam the world. Chapter 394. In the Tao of weapons, be it sword or saber techniques, there are 3 realms: form, force and intent. The Saber Emperor's voice continued, by form, it refers to the moves of a saber technique. That's the most basic realm. As long as a cultivator is willing to cultivate diligently, they will definitely be able to reach a level where they can wield the saber with ease. Force is the second realm. It's relatively abstract and can be understood as aura, momentum and momentum. It's not something that everyone can cultivate. Some people won't be able to understand the meaning of force their entire lives. At the realm of force, the might of a saber technique will be even greater and rise to a whole new level. The third realm is intent. Swords have sword intents and sabers have saber intents. Simply put, intent is a concept that is even more ethereal and ethereal. A single slash will possess the might of heaven and earth. Only by cultivating an essence spirit will one be able to comprehend the mysteries of intent. One had to be at the nascent soul realm at the very least if they wanted to cultivate to the third realm. Su Zimo did not have to consider that at the moment. Right now, he only had to cultivate the first two realms of his saber technique. Su Zimo withdrew Blood Quencher and recalled the 5 stances of the saber technique that the Saber Emperor demonstrated before starting to practice them on the mountain peak. Just as the Saber Sovereign had said, even though there were only 5 simple saber techniques, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to execute a complete saber technique. Su Zimo finally understood why the Saber Emperor set up such a test. The Sea Calming Manual had way too high a requirement for one's physique. Countercurrent was merely a starting stance, and if one's physique was not strong enough, their entire arm would explode. After attaining lesser mastery of the orifice clearing section, Su Zimo could only release it while channeling his bloodline. Every single muscle in his body had to be mobilized for that slash. Of course, that was not the only difficulty in executing a complete saber technique. Every single move, timing, angle of attack, control and strength must not be off in the slightest. Otherwise, the saber technique would not be able to be executed. He had to experiment and practice repeatedly. Fortunately, Su Zimo had experienced countercurrent, raging waves, vortex, and ripple when he had crossed the Spirit Sea. It was relatively easy for him to understand them. 10 days later, Su Zimo did not sleep or rest. He was finally able to complete the first 4 moves of the saber technique. He wasn't familiar with the 4 styles of saber art. In fact, he was still a little shaky, but he had finally succeeded. However, no matter how hard Su Zimo adjusted, recalled, and practiced, he could not perform the last move, the sea quelling move. It was clearly a very simple strike, but Su Zimo was unable to use it. Su Zimo wasn't discouraged. According to the Saber Sovereign, the Sea Calming stance was the essence of the Sea Calming Manual. If he could comprehend it, he could go anywhere in the world. What kind of realm was that? It was probably beyond Su Zimo's knowledge. During these 10 days, apart from Su Zimo, there was also a burly man on the mountain peak who watched Su Zimo practice his saber technique silently without saying anything. 10 days later, when he saw that Su Zimo was able to perform the first 4 moves of the saber technique completely, a look of relief flashed through the burly man's eyes. "Very good, you're very good." The Saber Sovereign nodded and his voice gradually dimmed. His figure faded rapidly as well and disappeared from the world. Su Zimo retracted his saber and bowed deeply in the direction where the Saber Sovereign's figure disappeared. The next moment, the Saber Mountain collapsed and the Spirit Sea evaporated. Baiyu smiled sinisterly and in a flash, withdrew a long saber with a cold glint from his storage bag and sped toward Su Zimo. When he arrived close, Baiyu slashed with his saber. That slash was neither fast nor strong. Furthermore, it did not emit any killing intent. Baiyu was worried that he would awaken Su Zimo, who was in the midst of enlightenment, and something unexpected would happen. It was silent, but it was a fatal strike. Su Zimo's eyes were still tightly shut, as though he had not sensed the impending danger and was on the brink of death. When they saw that, many cultivators shook their heads and sighed. Initially, everyone was envious of this person for obtaining the Saber Emperor's inheritance. However, who would have thought that this person would die in the blink of an eye? At the end of the day, they could only lament that fate was toying with them. When he saw that the blade was about to slice Su Zimo's throat, Baiyu's lips curled into a smug smile. "Who cares if you have the Saber Emperor's inheritance? You're still going to die in my hands." Baiyu sneered. Just as the blade was about to slice Su Zimo's throat, Su Zimo's figure suddenly retreated without warning, narrowly avoiding that fatal slash. Baiyu's expression changed and he narrowed his eyes. Chapter 395. Baiyu could clearly see that the blade had already sliced through the hairs on the surface of Su Zimo's skin. If it had advanced by an inch, the latter's throat would have been slit. However, the slash still missed. It was a hair's breadth away. The strangest thing was that Su Zimo did not open his eyes throughout the entire process. This dodging action seemed to have been done subconsciously. Su Zimo lowered his gaze like an old monk in meditation, immersed in his own world and oblivious to everything in the outside world. You still want to comprehend the Tao? Bai Yu sneered and no longer concealed the killing intent in his heart. Channeling his bloodline, his spirit saber buzzed and shone brightly with spirit light as he released his full strength and slashed towards Su Zimo. The slash was extremely fast and arrived almost instantly. Swash! Su Zimo's expression was unchanged and his eyes were still closed. His figure drifted like a willow and he dodged Bai Yu's murderous slash once more. Bai Yu frowned. He truly could not understand Su Zimo's current state. Su Zimo's eyes were closed and he could not see the trajectory of the saber because he could not see. There was no time for him to dodge if he relied on his hearing to judge the sound of the wind. However, Su Zimo managed to dodge it just like that. If the first time was a coincidence, avoiding 2 consecutive slashes, you can dodge? Let's see how long you can dodge. Bai Yu strode forward and his saber trembled, emitting a faint blood stench that enveloped Su Zimo. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Bai Yu slashed continuously and released his sect's secret manual, Shura Saber. Each slash was fatal and relentless. Furthermore, the angles of his attacks were extremely tricky. Even in that situation, Su Zimo did not open his eyes and retreated continuously. However, as time passed by, Su Zimo's space to dodge decreased and he was gradually enveloped by Bai Yu's saber techniques, sealing off his path of retreat. The exchange between the two of them confused the surrounding cultivators. To be precise, this was not considered a fight because one of them had not attacked the entire time and had been dodging the entire time. This person has guts. He's actually still comprehending the Tao. He really doesn't want his life anymore. This person's eyes are clearly closed, but he seems to be able to sense danger. It's as if he has opened his third eye. How did he do it? In everyone's eyes, it was as if Su Zimo had some kind of keen sense for danger and could calmly dodge. In reality, Su Zimo was currently in a half-awake state. Just as Bai Yu attacked him, his spiritual perception had already alerted him. Su Zimo could completely wake up from his state of enlightenment. But this opportunity was too rare. Su Zimo felt that he was just a little bit away from touching the secrets of force. Therefore, Su Zimo forcibly ignored the interference of the outside world. He only relied on his sharp spiritual sense to subconsciously make dodging movements while he continued to comprehend wholeheartedly. This was an extremely dangerous and crazy move. If anything went wrong, Su Zimo would die on the spot. No matter what he comprehended, it would be useless. It was only because he had cleared 7 orifices and cultivated to lesser mastery of the orifice clearing section that his strength and speed had increased that he could hold out against the attacks of the fiend heir of Shura sect for such a long time. However, he would definitely lose if he defended for a long time. Bai Yu's saber technique was getting sharper and the blood stench of his saber was getting heavier. Su Zimo's space was shrinking continuously and he could only dodge within an extremely narrow area. The situation was critical. However, he had yet to comprehend the secrets of force. Su Zimo had to make a choice. All of a sudden, a thought flashed through Su Zimo's mind. Bai Yu's attacks were like undercurrents at the bottom of the sea that came wave after wave in an endless manner. Su Zimo recalled how he struggled to advance at the bottom of the sea and fought against the undercurrents. Gradually, he was enlightened. Countercurrent stance. The essence of that stance was mainly in the word reverse. What was reverse? Cultivators who wanted to attain the Tao as a mortal and break free from the shackles of heaven and earth, that was reverse. Reverse meant that one would not retreat and would advance bravely. Su Zimo had been going against the current the entire time. Back in Pingyang town, his knees did not bend and his spine did not collapse against the bullying of perfected being Tsang Lang, that was his reverse. Reverse meant that one had great courage and was fearless. In reality, everything that happened in Pingyang town back then could not have escaped Dai Yu's senses. If Su Zimo had chosen to kneel down and submit back then, Dai Yu would have only killed perfected being Tsang Lang and resolved the karma between her and Su Zimo before leaving. It was because of Su Zimo's reverse that he gained Dai Yu's recognition and was able to change his fate. Fate could only be changed by defying the heavens. One had to be able to defy the heavens to have the right to change their fate. Defy to become an immortal. Reverse meant that one was unyielding and did not retreat. It was fearless, unyielding and invincible. Countercurrent was a reversal of the situation. At that moment, Su Zimo could no longer avoid or retreat. When he saw that, Bai Yu's eyes flashed with delight as he laughed menacingly. You can't hide anymore, right? Hand over your life. Swoosh! The saber in Bai Yu's hands slashed forward and there were layers of saber shadows. Blood chi filled the air and the stench of blood filled the air. All of a sudden, Su Zimo opened his eyes. His eyes were like crystals in the deep sea, clear and bright, shimmering with a mysterious glint. There was no panic or fear. The moment he caught sight of those eyes, Bai Yu felt a sense of uneasiness. Unknowingly, a blood-colored saber appeared in Su Zimo's hands, perhaps when he opened his eyes. The saber was gigantic and shone with 5 bedazzling spirit lights. Countercurrent. Su Zimo said indifferently and waved his hands. Swoosh! As Blood Quencher was waved, the sound of a tide surging against the current could be heard from the saber. Initially, Bai Yu's aura was domineering and he had the upper hand. However, with that slash, the situation between the two of them reversed. A torrential force that could break through the seas burst forth from Blood Quencher's blade and crushed over like a tidal wave. Instantly, all of Bai Yu's saber shadows dissipated. The blood stench from the saber was washed away by the invisible tide as well. In the face of that might, Bai Yu's saber technique appeared extremely crude and could not withstand a single blow. Saber force. Bai Yu's eyes widened in shock. How was that possible? Ever since he entered Shura sect at the age of 5, he had been practicing his saber. He had been immersed in the Tao of the saber for dozens of years and had only reached the peak of level 1 of the saber technique. He had yet to come into contact with the secrets of force. The person before him had only cultivated his saber technique for 10 days and yet, he had already comprehended saber force. In the face of saber force, no matter how intricate a saber technique was, it would only be superficial. The two sabers collided. Clang! Bai Yu shuddered and his face turned incomparably pale. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, he was sent flying weakly with a dim gaze. Psst! The surrounding cultivators were in an uproar. A single slash. Initially, Bai Yu had the upper hand. However, in the blink of an eye, Su Zimo opened his eyes and sent the fiend heir of Shura sect flying with a single slash. Chapter 396. The difference was way too great. Initially, Bai Yu's only advantage was his saber technique. But now that Su Zimo had comprehended countercurrent, Bai Yu's advantage was gone. Furthermore, Su Zimo had attained lesser mastery of the orifice clearing section and his strength had increased tremendously. He was already suppressing Bai Yu. A single slash was enough to severely injure Bai Yu. Su Zimo's gaze was cold as he flashed and chased after Bai Yu with his saber. Bai Yu's face was frightfully pale and he looked at Su Zimo who was speeding over with a resolute look in his eyes. Biting his tongue gently, he spat out a stream of essence blood. Dong! 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 Bai Yu's chest heaved and his heart thumped furiously. Every time it beat, fresh blood would burst out and flow through his limbs and bones. On the surface of the blood, there was a layer of strange flames that emitted an endless amount of power. Blood escape. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes. He knew best about the secret skill that Bai Yu released. In the ancient coffin deep underground, Su Zimo obtained a blood refinement fiend sutra that recorded the secret skill. Back in the Battle of Dongling Valley, Su Zimo had relied on blood escape to escape alive. By chance, he arrived at the capital of Great Zhou and managed to avert danger. Once blood escape was released, a third of his bloodline would be burned in exchange for a burst of speed for a short period of time, allowing him to escape far away. Shoo! Baiyu turned into a streak of blood light and sped into the distance. In the blink of an eye, he was 1,000 feet away. It was too fast. Back then, Su Zimo even managed to shake off perfected Jean Dan's pursuit with the speed obtained from blood escape. Now that he wanted to catch up to Baiyu, Su Zimo had two solutions. First, he could take on his demon form and release his blood chi. Second, he could release blood escape and give chase as well. On second thought, neither of those solutions were appropriate. The first solution would cause too much trouble for Su Zimo in front of thousands of cultivators. The second was that the gains did not make up for the losses. Su Zimo hesitated for a moment before giving up on the idea of chasing after Baiyu. He kept Blood Quencher and took out a moon-white bow from his storage bag. Just because Su Zimo didn't chase after White Feather didn't mean that he would let him go. Draw the bow and knock the arrow. 5 spirit tattoos shone, and Su Zimo seemed to be hugging a full moon in his arms. Whoosh! The sharp arrow pierced through the air. Heart-piercing arrow. With Su Zimo's arm strength and the Quasian-born spiritual weapon, the moon concealment bow, the arrow was as fast as lightning as it pierced towards Baiyu's back. Baiyu, who was in the midst of blood escape, seemed to have sensed something and crushed a protective talisman. Boom! The arrow collided with the protective talisman and exploded with a loud bang. Baiyu trembled and coughed up blood again. He staggered and almost fell. Su Zimo threw his head back and laughed heartily. He raised his voice and said, "Good, you're lucky to be able to dodge this arrow. I'll spare your life today. Also, it's all thanks to your help that I was able to comprehend the force of countercurrent this time round." Just now, if not for Baiyu's ferocious attacks that forced Su Zimo into a corner, he might not have been able to comprehend the force of countercurrent from a hopeless situation. Baiyu paused for a moment and turned to glare at Su Zimo with a venomous gaze. Sensing Baiyu's gaze, Su Zimo smiled gently. "You had better hide in the ancient battlefield from now on and don't let me see you again. Otherwise, you won't even have the chance to release blood escape the next time." Baiyu grit his teeth and howled in hatred. He turned and sprinted, turning into a blood spot and vanishing before everyone's eyes. In reality, even if Su Zimo didn't chase after Baiyu, he would most likely be doomed. Blood escape had side effects, and they were quite terrifying. Be it humans or demons, they would become extremely weak after burning a third of their bloodline. Danger was everywhere in the ancient battlefield. Unless Baiyu could find an absolutely safe place before the power of blood escape ended, he would definitely die. Su Zimo retracted his moon concealment bow and left in front of countless shocked gazes. Su Zimo had gained a lot from this trip. All that was left was for him to continue cultivating and familiarize himself with the saber techniques of sea calming so that he could comprehend the force of the other 4 stances. Every single saber technique corresponded to a different force. The intents were different as well. Taking a deep breath of air, Su Zimo checked the map and sped towards Shentian City. "I've only left the city for slightly more than 10 days. Hopefully, nothing will happen in the city." That was Su Zimo's thought. North City, Shentian City. Elixir Yang's sect, rear hall. It was noisy and the occasional berating of cultivators sounded from time to time, as though they were extremely angry. Occasionally, the roars of spirit beasts could be heard, causing one's heart to shudder. In a corner of the rear hall, a woman leaned against the wall. She had a frail figure and her face was pale. Her lips were purple and her eyes were tightly shut. No one knew if she was dead or alive. By the looks of it, it was none other than Su Xiaoning. In front of Xiaoning stood a tall and muscular demon beast covered in pitch-black scales. It resembled a wolf or tiger with sharp claws and fangs. Its pitch-black eyes were wide open and it surveyed its surroundings with hostility. That pitch-black demon beast was none other than Night Spirit. Night Spirit stood in front of Xiaoning and his tail swayed gently. There was even a trace of blood on his tailbone that shone coldly. Not far in front of Night Spirit, a corpse lay on the ground with the sect badge of Elixir Yang sect hanging on his waist. There was a bloody hole in his glabella with warm blood flowing out. It was clear that this person was killed by Night Spirit and had just died not long ago. Yan Jun and the other Elixir Yang sect disciples stood opposite Night Spirit and faced him with anger and agitation. "Beast, you truly don't know what's good for you. You're just like your master," Yan Jun said coldly. A cultivator shouted, "Beast, you'll have to pay with your life for killing an Elixir Yang sect disciple." The other cultivators pointed at Night Spirit and cursed as well. Although all of them wielded a flying sword in their hands, none of them dared to attack recklessly. Everyone had witnessed the fall of the Elixir Yang sect's cultivator. In front of Night Spirit, that person died on the spot before he could even summon his flying sword. Sensing the hostility of the cultivators, Night Spirit's gaze turned cold. Opening his mouth slightly, a deep roar sounded from the depths of his throat that sent chills down everyone's spines. Given Night Spirit's savage nature, he would have started a massacre by now instead of allowing these cultivators to berate and humiliate him. There were a few times when Night Spirit lowered his body and looked like he was about to pounce. However, he held himself back. From time to time, he would turn back to look at Su Xiaoning, as though he was worried about her safety, and there was a hint of worry and guilt in his eyes. Night Spirit hovered in front of Xiaoning. From that angle, he could block all incoming threats. Right then, an Elixir Yang sect disciple from the crowd came to Yan Jun's side and said in a deep voice, "Senior brother Yan, let's not bother about Su Zimo anymore. Why don't we attack together to kill that demon? No matter how strong that beast is, how can he defend against so many of us?" "That's right." Another cultivator nodded. "Junior brother Pooh can't die just like that. Let's work together to kill that beast and take revenge for Junior brother Pooh." Yan Jun's expression darkened as he pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he raised his palm and said coldly, "Everyone, get ready." Chapter 397. Hold on. A figure strode in from outside. Although she was dressed as a man, her features were picturesque and she was beautiful. It was none other than the commander of Elixir Yang sect, Tang Yu. Sweeping her gaze, Tang Yu frowned slightly when she caught sight of the dead Elixir Yang sect disciples on the ground. When she caught sight of Xiaoning, her expression changed starkly as she exclaimed, "Purple corpse corrosion poison." Uncle Liang nodded with a grim expression. "Her face is green and her lips are purple. There's no mistake about it. It should be one of the 7 lethals of poison sect, the purple corpse corrosion poison." Tang Yu was initially in seclusion cultivation when she was woken up and found out that something big had happened outside. She heard from her fellow disciples that Xiaoning was attacked on the long streets of the North City. Although the attacker was killed by Night Spirit on the spot, Xiaoning was still poisoned. To think that it's poison sect. Tang Yu's expression darkened and turned terrible. Right now, the north city of Shentian City was guarded by Elixir Yang sect and Chiguramon. Tang Yu was still puzzled as to which cultivator would be so blind as to injure someone in the North City. To think that the other party was Poison Sect, one of the 5 heretical doctrines. Although Poison Sect disciples were not strong in terms of direct combat strength, many factions and cultivators were not willing to make enemies with them. Poison Sect had 7 lethals. Every single one of them was extremely fatal and one would die upon contact with them. Furthermore, Poison Sect disciples were crafty and vicious in their methods and specialized in hidden weapons that were superb. It was truly way too easy for Poison Sect disciples to assassinate someone. Eating, drinking, breathing, casual contact, even the most common action could cost you your life. Even Foundation establishment cultivators could be poisoned by Poison Sect's Chi refinement warriors if they were careless. It was not uncommon for one to fail miserably at an easy task. Most cultivators would hide far away from Poison Sect's disciples, not wanting to incur their wrath or befriend them, afraid that it would be too late to avoid them. Tang Yu could not understand why a Poison Sect disciple would look for Su Xiaoning. A cultivator who could release the purple corpse corrosion poison definitely had a high status in Poison Sect. Why would a poison sect disciple take action personally just to poison a late-stage Foundation establishment elixir refinement master? Right then, Uncle Liang exclaimed softly, strange, given the toxicity of the purple corpse corrosion poison, this woman should have turned into a pool of blood long ago. Why is her corpse still intact without any signs of decay? Those poisoned by the purple corpse decay poison would die within 10 breaths of time. After 10 breaths of time, the corpse would rot and turn into a puddle of blood. Even the gods would find it difficult to save them. Furthermore, the blood contained a strong purple corpse decay poison. Anyone who came into contact with it would still die. Tang Yu stared at Xiaoning for a while, deep in thought. Still alive? Maybe it is an illusion, but the green on Ning's face and the purple on her lips seemed to be lighter than just now. How is this possible? Tang Yu had some understanding of the purple corpse corrosion poison. Even 8 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators would not be able to escape death if they were tainted by the poison, let alone late-stage Foundation establishment cultivators. This was the terrifying aspect of the poison sect. What's going on? Uncle Liang pointed to the corpse on the ground and turned to ask. A cultivator stood out and pointed to Night Spirit not far away, saying hatefully, Junior Brother Pooh wanted to check on Su Xiaoning out of kindness when he saw that she was poisoned. To think that he would be killed by that beast. Tang Yu frowned. That statement did not sound like much. Night Spirit was a demon beast to begin with. There was a high chance that it was triggered by its master's injury, causing it to go berserk and attack others. However, Tang Yu felt that something was amiss. Yan Jun's expression was stern as he shouted, Uncle Liang, junior sister, Elixir Yang sect is one of the 4 unorthodox groups. How can we allow our disciples to be slaughtered as we please? Furthermore, this is just a beast. It killed a disciple of Elixir Yang sect, so it has to pay with its life. Pausing for a moment, Yan Jun continued, this is a beast reared by Su Zimo. Now that it's in trouble, he won't be able to escape the blame when Su Zimo returns. That's right. Let's take revenge for Junior Brother Pooh. Kill that beast. Kill it. Everyone from Elixir Yang sect shouted agitatedly. The development of this matter was completely out of Tang Yu's control. No matter what, Su Zimo's side was an outsider. If she were to protect Night Spirit, she would not be able to convince the masses and appease the anger in their hearts. There was a high chance that it would cause an internal conflict within the sect. Tang Yu bit her lip gently and frowned. She was a little flustered and did not know what to do. When he saw that, Uncle Liang sighed internally. Tang Yu was considered an outstanding talent of Elixir Yang sect's younger generation. She was smart and sharp, there were very few things that could escape her eyes. But, Tang Yu still lacked a sense of decisiveness and dominance. Without those things, she would not be able to control the situation. Suddenly, a figure flashed through Uncle Liang's mind. That person is truly, Uncle Liang could not continue. It was difficult for him to give an accurate evaluation of that person. That person looked like a cultured and refined scholar. However, deep down, he exuded a domineering aura that looked down on everything. His methods were sharp and he was decisive in killing. Everything else aside, that temperament alone was enough for him to be ranked in the top 10 of the younger generation. Right then, a voice sounded from outside the hall. Who are you guys trying to kill? The tone of this voice was flat, neither light nor heavy, but it suppressed the noise and clamor in the hall. Tang Yu's petite body shuddered and a look of joy flashed through her eyes as she turned around. A green-robed cultivator with delicate features strode in and entered the back hall. Sweeping his gaze was like cold lightning and the entire back hall went silent. This was a powerful aura that was indescribable but could suppress everything. Su Zimo had returned. The moment they caught sight of him, the scene of the bloody battle on the long street appeared in everyone's minds and their courage weakened subconsciously. Everyone's gazes landed on Su Zimo. Uncle Liang could clearly see a hint of fear and respect in the eyes of the sect disciples. When Su Zimo entered the back hall and caught sight of Xiaoning's frail state, his eyes flashed coldly and killing intent surged in his heart. Tang Yu said softly, "Fellow Taoist Su, I was negligent in not sending any sect disciples to accompany Xiaoning. I truly did not expect that someone from Poison's sect would target her." Su Zimo shook his head without saying anything with a dark expression. If Xiaoning was poisoned even with the protection of the Night Spirit, it would have been useless even if she had an Elixir Yang sect disciple by her side. Tang Yu could not be blamed for this. Although Tang Yu could not confirm whether Xiaoning was dead or alive, Su Zimo could clearly hear a weak heartbeat from Xiaoning's chest after clearing his 7 orifices. Furthermore, that heartbeat seemed to be getting stronger. In other words, Xiaoning's condition was improving. Su Zimo walked toward Xiaoning's side. Before he could take a few steps, Yan Jun's figure flashed and blocked Su Zimo's path, sneering provocatively. "Su Zimo, don't give me that look." Yan Jun shouted, "It's true that your sister is dead. That was done by someone from Poison's sect and has nothing to do with Elixir Yang sect. However, our Elixir Yang sect disciple was killed by this beast of yours. We witnessed it with our own eyes. You have to give Elixir Yang sect an explanation. Is that so?" Su Zimo was expressionless as he nodded. "Good kill. What did you say?" Yan Jun's eyes widened. "Get lost." "You?" Before Yan Jun could finish, Su Zimo suddenly reached out and slapped Yan Jun's cheek heavily, sending him flying and knocking him unconscious in a corner. Everyone was in an uproar. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.